Imagine if just 4 hours stood between you and a radically transformed life where stress no longer controls your breath, where anxiety no longer clouds your decisions, and where the noise of the world finally begins to fade into silence. What if I told you that the version of you you've been searching for, the calm, clear, focused, powerful you, has been waiting this whole time, buried just beneath the chaos of modern life? This isn't some overnight miracle or motivational hype. This is ancient wisdom, quiet, deep, and timeless, offered through the lens of Buddhism. A path that doesn't promise you a new identity, but instead reveals the truth of who you already are. In the next few hours, you won't be told to hustle harder or chase success louder. You'll be gently guided into stillness, into clarity, into practices and principles that have helped millions find peace, not by escaping life, but by finally showing up to it fully awake. This is not just another video. This is an inner retreat, a sacred turning point, a place where the old patterns begin to dissolve and the real you starts to rise. So take a breath, slow down, and step into this space. Because 4 hours from now, you won't just feel different, you'll be different. The better you isn't out there. It begins here. 1. Let go or be pulled down. Let go or be pulled. The truth is, much of the emotional weight you carry every day doesn't come from what happened to you. It comes from your decision to keep holding on to it. It comes from the conversations you keep replaying, the endings you refuse to accept, the people who have already walked away but still live inside your mind. You keep gripping tightly to things that life has already asked you to release, hoping that somehow, if you hold on long enough, it will go back to how it used to be. But the painful truth is this: the harder you cling, the more you suffer. The tighter your grip, the deeper the wound becomes. And the more you resist letting go, the more trapped you feel, not by fate, not by destiny, but by your own refusal to surrender to what is. Buddhism teaches that attachment is the root of suffering. But attachment doesn't just mean material things, it means mental fixation. It means emotional chains. It means clinging to how you thought things should be, instead of accepting how they actually are. You may think holding on makes you loyal, you may think it makes you strong, but real strength is in the release. Real strength is being able to say, this mattered, this was real, but now I must let it go. You see, there are people in your life who were never meant to stay forever. There are dreams that had a season. There are chapters that were beautiful but were only meant to teach you something, not define your entire existence. Yet you resist their departure. You build stories around their presence. You create an identity based on something that has already passed. And in doing so, you bind yourself to something that no longer serves your path. You live in the past, while the present patiently waits for you to return. And every time you hold on to something that is already gone, you say no to the life that is trying to reach you. This resistance becomes suffering, not because life is cruel, but because you are demanding that it stay still. You want permanence in a world built on change. You want certainty in a reality made of impermanence. But life doesn't operate on your preferences. It flows as it must. It unfolds as it should. And when you fight that flow, you become exhausted, not just mentally, but spiritually. You feel stuck, not because you have no options, but because you're unwilling to accept the one truth that will free you. It's time to let go. Letting go is not the same as forgetting. It is not a betrayal of what mattered. It is not cold, heartless, or dismissive. Letting go is sacred. It is courageous. It is the gentle act of loosening your grip on something that is hurting you so that healing can finally begin. It is saying, "This mattered deeply, but I cannot carry it anymore." It is choosing peace over pain. It is choosing movement over stagnation. It is trusting that your life is not over just because something ended. In fact, sometimes it is only when something ends that your real life begins. But to reach that peace, you must walk through the discomfort. You must sit with the silence. You must grieve what you're letting go of, and grieve the version of yourself that existed in that chapter. There is pain in this, yes, but it is a clean pain. It is a pain that leads somewhere. It is the kind of pain that releases, that purifies, that frees. And once you pass through that threshold, you will feel lighter. Not because you lost something, but because you are no longer carrying what you were never meant to hold forever. You will breathe deeper, not because your life got easier, but because you stopped fighting the current. You will feel a sense of peace, not because everything is perfect, but because you've accepted that it doesn't need to be. You will begin to move forward, not bitterly, but bravely. Not because you're numb, but because you're finally awake. The river of life is always flowing. You can either let go and allow it to carry you into new places, new peace, new power you can resist, and feel like you're drowning in the past. You must decide. Do you want to grow, or do you want to grip? Because you cannot do both. And no matter how long you delay it, life will keep bringing you back to this truth again and again until you are ready to surrender. So, let go. Let go of the version of life you thought you had to live. Let go of the people who are no longer walking beside you. Let go of the dreams that no longer reflect who you've become. Let go of the anger, the blame, the illusion that you need closure to move forward. Let go, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring about your peace more than your past. Let go, or be pulled deeper into the pain you were never meant to live in forever. Let go, because peace is waiting on the other side. 3. Become the watcher, not the reactor. Your mind is not your enemy, but it becomes one when you allow it to control you rather than observe it. Thoughts are not facts, emotions are not commands. Yet most people live as if every emotion must be acted on and every thought must be believed. One negative comment triggers a storm of defensiveness. One mistake floods you with shame. One anxious thought takes over your entire nervous system. But Buddhism teaches us something radically powerful, something that can change the way you experience every moment of your life. It teaches us to become the watcher of the mind, not the slave of it. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who hears them. You are not your emotions. You are the one who feels them rise and fall. Like clouds drifting across a vast sky, your thoughts come and go, but the sky remains untouched. That sky is your awareness. And when you learn to sit in that awareness instead of reacting to every cloud that passes, you begin to unlock a level of inner peace that the outside world can never disturb. Reactivity is the prison of the unconscious. It means your peace depends on everything going your way. It means your emotions are steering the ship and you're just holding on, hoping not to drown. But when you learn to pause, to breathe, to observe what's happening within you, instead of impulsively reacting to it, you shift into a higher level of consciousness. You create space. Space between the trigger and the response. Space between the pain and the pattern. Space between the emotion and the explosion. In that space, you reclaim your power, because that space is where awareness lives. And awareness is the beginning of transformation. When someone criticizes you, the reactive mind says, defend, attack, prove them wrong. But the watcher in you says, pause, observe the hurt, breathe into the tension, respond only if necessary and with wisdom, not ego. When fear rises, the reactive mind says, run, avoid, panic. But the watcher in you says, here is fear, let me sit with it. Let me understand it. Let me allow it to be without becoming it. When anger floods your chest, the reactive mind says, explode, control, blame. But the watcher says, "This anger is energy. Let me witness it. Let me breathe into it. Let me not speak until I've returned to stillness." This is not weakness. This is not passivity. This is mastery. You begin to live not like a puppet pulled by the strings of your feelings, but as a conscious being who can feel without falling, who can experience pain without becoming bitter, who can witness anger without being consumed by it. And this takes practice, not once, not twice, but daily. You become the watcher through meditation, through mindfulness, through the courage to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. When you meditate, you're not trying to silence your mind. You're training yourself to witness it without reacting. You're learning to see thoughts rise like waves and let them pass without chasing them. You're learning to let emotions surge through the body without acting them out. You're learning to return again and again to the breath, to the present, to the stillness that always exists beneath the chaos. And over time, something incredible happens. You stop reacting to life. You start responding to it with calm, with clarity, with presence. You become less affected by small things. You start hearing people without the need to interrupt or defend. You begin noticing your inner world more than you fixate on the outer one. You feel something inside you growing quietly, steadily, powerfully. It is your awareness. It is the birth of a new you, not someone who is numb to life, but someone who is awake within it. You will still feel pain. You will still be triggered. But instead of being pulled into the storm, you'll become the calm at the center of it. You'll recognize your own patterns and choose new ones. You'll feel the rise of emotion without giving it your voice, your energy, or your peace. You'll learn to walk away when silence is stronger than response. You'll understand that not every opinion deserves your defense, not every insult deserves your energy, and not every fear deserves your obedience. To become the watcher is to stop living in reaction and start living in awareness. It is to sit quietly with yourself until the ego grows bored and the truth of your being comes forward. It is to remain grounded when the world spins around you. It is to master your mind, not through force, but through observation. And in that mastery, you will discover a freedom that few people ever taste, the freedom of no longer being a prisoner of your own impulses. You will no longer be triggered by every comment, disturbed by every opinion, or shaken by every moment of discomfort. You will carry within you a peace that nothing can take from you, because you have learned the most sacred discipline: to watch, to wait, and to choose your response with intention, not emotion. That is the power of the watcher, and that is the path to your transformation. 4. Suffering ends when you stop resisting reality. The pain you feel isn't always from the event, it's from your resistance to the event. Life happens. It unfolds in ways you didn't expect, with people you didn't plan to lose, in situations you never thought you'd face. And instead of allowing life to move through you, you resist it. You tighten up. You say, "This shouldn't be happening. This isn't fair. I didn't ask for this." And in that resistance, you suffer not because life is punishing you, but because you're trying to argue with reality. And no one has ever won that fight. Buddhism teaches a profound truth. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Pain is part of life. The body breaks down, people change, plans fall apart, emotions rise. Death touches everything. But suffering, that deep, ongoing inner turmoil, is what arises when you reject what already is. You say, "I can't accept this," even though it's already happened. You try to reverse the irreversible. You keep replaying the past like it will give you a different outcome. But the more you resist the present, the more trapped you become in pain that doesn't need to last. Resistance is subtle. It hides behind thoughts like, "Why me?" or "It's not supposed to be like this." It creates a war inside you. You want peace, but you're at war with how life unfolded. You want freedom, but you're shackled to your preferences. You want healing, but you refuse to accept the wound. But Buddhism invites you into a different way of being. It invites you to stop resisting and start receiving, not because life is always kind, but because acceptance is the doorway to peace. Because when you finally allow the present to be exactly as it is, even with its pain, something shifts inside you. You stop wasting energy on what you cannot control, and you begin to flow with what is. This doesn't mean you like what happened. It doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop fighting what has already happened. Acceptance is not passive, it is powerful. It says, I may not have chosen this, but I choose to stop suffering over it. It says, this is painful, but I don't need to add layers of judgment and blame to it. It says, I am willing to meet this moment as it is not as I wish it were. And in that space, suffering begins to dissolve. You stop clinging to the illusion that you can change the past. You stop demanding that life follow your script. You stop thinking peace is only possible when everything goes your way. You begin to discover that peace has always been available. It was just hidden behind your resistance. Think of it like water. If you hold a rock in the middle of a flowing river, the water crashes against it, creating noise and turbulence. But if you remove the rock, if you stop resisting, the water flows silently and smoothly. Your resistance is the rock. Your acceptance is the removal of it. When you accept what is, the chaos inside you begins to quiet. You return to stillness. And in that stillness, wisdom arises. Acceptance is not surrendering to helplessness. It is surrendering to truth. It is saying yes to life, even when it brings what you didn't ask for. Because the truth is, no amount of mental arguing will change what has already occurred. The only thing you can change is how you meet it. And when you meet it with openness instead of resistance, you allow healing to begin. You allow clarity to rise. You allow transformation to unfold. You will still cry. You will still grieve. But your tears will not be chained to resentment. Your grief will not turn into bitterness. Instead, it will be a clean painer, natural human experience that passes through you without leaving poison behind. That's the difference between pain and suffering. Pain opens you, suffering traps you. When you accept what is, you stop being a victim of life and start being a student of it. Every challenge becomes a lesson. Every disappointment becomes redirection. Every heartbreak becomes purification. You begin to see that the worst things didn't break you, they revealed you. And in that awareness, you stop asking life to be easy, and you start asking yourself to be strong enough to meet it as it is. So ask yourself honestly, what are you still resisting? What truth are you avoiding? What moment in your life are you still arguing with, long after it's passed? And what would happen, what peace might enter if you stopped resisting and simply accepted it? Not because it's okay, but because it already happened. Because your freedom doesn't come from controlling life. It comes from surrendering to it with courage, awareness, and a heart willing to begin again. This is not giving up. This is waking up. This is the wisdom of letting go of the fight and allowing life to move through you as a teacher, not a punishment. The moment you stop resisting what is, you begin healing. The moment you embrace the now, even if it's painful, you begin transforming. Suffering is not your destiny. Awareness is. Acceptance is. And in that acceptance, you will find the doorway to peace that was waiting all along. 5. The mind creates the world. The world you live in is not just made of people, places, and events. It is shaped, moment by moment, by your thoughts, beliefs, perceptions, and reactions. Two people can walk through the same. Stormone finds beauty in the rain, the other curses the clouds. The difference is not in the weather, but in the mind. Buddhism teaches a profound and often overlooked truth. Your mind doesn't just interpret the world, it creates it. With your thoughts, you are either painting a prison or opening a window to freedom. You're either reinforcing the stories of fear and lack, or choosing the path of clarity and peace. Your outer experience is a mirror of your inner state, and if you truly want to change your life, you must begin with the source, your mind. Every thought you entertain becomes a lens through which you see everything. If your mind is filled with suspicion, even kindness will look like manipulation. If your mind is ruled by fear, even opportunities will look like traps. If your heart is filled with old pain, even innocent words will feel like an attack. The stories you repeat become your reality, not because they are true, but because you believe them. Your beliefs shape your attention shapes your emotions shape your behavior. And your behavior reinforces the world you experience. It's a cycle, and it always starts in the mind. But here's the deeper truth. Your thoughts are not permanent. Your beliefs are not facts. The way you've been seeing the world is not the only way to see it. You are not condemned to the patterns of yesterday. Buddhism teaches that just as the mind creates suffering, it can also create liberation. The same mind that causes anxiety can be trained to rest in stillness. The same mind that obsesses over control can be taught to surrender. The same mind that clings to the past can be guided to return to the present. Transformation begins not with what you do, but with how you see. When the Buddha said, "With our thoughts, we make the world," he wasn't offering a poetic idea. He was revealing a spiritual law. Your reality doesn't exist outside of your perception. Everything is filtered through the quality of your awareness. A noisy, restless mind will find problems in everything. A calm, centered mind will find peace in the same situation. This is why two people can experience the same day and walk away with entirely different stories. One says, "Nothing went right." The other says, "It was a beautiful reminder to slow down." Neither is lying. Each simply saw through the lens they carried. So the real question is, what lens are you wearing? What assumptions have you accepted as truth? What mental habits are quietly shaping every interaction, every relationship, every decision in your life? And are those habits serving you, or are they quietly sabotaging your peace? Buddhist practice is not about escaping the world. It's about transforming the way you experience it. Through mindfulness, you begin to notice your thoughts without blindly believing them. You start seeing the stories your mind tells you, and in that seeing, they begin to loosen. The mind says, "You're not good enough." And instead of obeying, you pause and observe. The mind says, "You'll fail again." And instead of retreating, you smile and keep moving forward. Every moment of awareness breaks a link in the chain of unconscious suffering. And it's in those small, quiet moments that your entire world begins to change. You realize that peace is not found by controlling every detail of life. It's found by choosing a calm and conscious mind in the middle of life. You learn that your past doesn't have to be your lens. Your wounds don't have to be your filter. You can breathe, return to the present, and choose again, this time with clarity, this time with freedom, this time with the strength that comes from knowing your power is not out there, it's in here. But this work is not instant. You must tend to the mind like a garden, uproot the weeds of doubt, fear, and judgment, plant seeds of compassion, stillness, and truth. Water them daily with mindfulness, and above all, protect that space. Protect your thoughts like you protect your home. Not everything deserves to live there. Not every story deserves to be repeated. Not every memory deserves to be relived. You are the gatekeeper of your mind, and in choosing what you allow in, you choose the quality of your life. Eventually, something miraculous happens. The same world that once overwhelmed you begins to soften. The same people who once triggered you now teach you. The same situations that once broke you now build you. Because you've changed the route, you've shifted from within, and now the outer world reflects that inner harmony. So the next time you feel trapped in your circumstances, remember, the real prison is not your life, it's your perception. And the key is in your hands. The mind is not your enemy, it is your canvas. What you paint on it becomes your world. Choose wisely, think consciously, see clearly, and your world will reflect the peace you've been searching for all along. 6. Be present or miss your whole life. Life is not something that happens in the past or the future. It only ever happens now, yet most people spend their entire lives anywhere but in the present moment. They carry the weight of yesterday and the anxiety of tomorrow while standing in a moment that asks only for their attention. The result is a quiet kind of suffering, a background ache that never goes away. It's the feeling that no matter how much you do, no matter how far you go, something is always missing. But what's missing isn't outside of you, it's your presence. And the great tragedy is that while you're busy worrying about life, you're not actually living it. Buddhism teaches that the root of so much human misery is our habit of abandoning the now. We're always somewhere else, in a memory, in a fantasy, in a plan, in a regret. We think happiness is coming in the next achievement, in the next relationship, in the next big moment. But every time that next arrives, our minds are already off chasing the one after it. We never land. We never pause. We never arrive fully where we are. And so, our lives pass us by hour, day by day, while we're too distracted to notice. Think about how many mornings you've rushed through without feeling the sunlight on your skin. How many meals you've eaten while scrolling your phone, not tasting a single bite. How many conversations you've had while your mind was somewhere else, already preparing your next response. This isn't just distraction, it's disconnection. And disconnection is what keeps us from joy. Because joy isn't found in things, it's found in awareness, in presence, in the quiet beauty of this moment, exactly as it is. To be present is not to abandon responsibility. It is not to forget the future or deny the past. It is to come back to reality, to what is real right now. Your breath, your body, the feeling of your feet on the ground, the sound of the wind outside your window, the weight of your own aliveness. That is what's real. That is what you miss when you chase illusions. The mind is like a monkey, always jumping from one thought to another. If you let it, it will pull you from the only place that peace exists, the now. This is why mindfulness matters. Not as a trendy practice or temporary escape, but as a sacred way of living. Mindfulness is the discipline of presence. It's the simple but powerful act of noticing, of being where your body is, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It's feeling your breath without trying to change it. It's listening with your whole soul. It's walking with awareness in your steps. It's returning again and again to this moment, no matter how many times your mind wanders. And when you do this, even for just a few seconds, you begin to notice something extraordinary. The present moment is not boring. It is alive. It is rich. It is full of tiny miracles that you've been too busy to see. The way sunlight filters through leaves, the way your chest rises and falls as you breathe, the way a simple cup of tea can feel like medicine when you drink it with awareness. These are not small things. These are life itself. And when you learn to be present with them, you stop feeling like you're always missing out, because you're no longer missing the moment you're in. But presence is more than just a practice, it's a way of healing. Because when you're present, you stop reliving the pain of the past. You stop projecting fear into the future. You allow yourself to just be without needing to perform, to impress, to prepare. You meet yourself as you are, And in that meeting, you begin to soften, you begin to trust. You begin to feel safer, not because everything is certain, but because you're no longer running from your own existence. The truth is, life will never slow down for you. There will always be something to plan, something to fix, something to chase. But you can choose to slow down for life. You can choose to step off the mental treadmill and ground yourself in what is real. You can choose to live deeply rather than quickly. You can choose to listen fully rather than constantly think of what's next. You can choose presence, not because it's easy, but because it's the only place joy is ever found. And no, you won't always be perfectly mindful. Your mind will wander, your emotions will flare, you will fall back into distraction. But that's not failure. That's part of the path. What matters is that you come back. Again and again, you return. Each time you return to the present, you reclaim your life. You reclaim your peace. You remind yourself that you don't need more to be happy. You just need to be here. So, begin now. Put the phone down. Take a deep breath. Feel your feet touching the earth. Listen to the sounds around you. Let the moment embrace you, because this moment is your life. Not tomorrow. Not next year. Not someday. This moment. Right here, right now. If you don't learn to be present, you will spend your whole life rushing to get somewhere else, only to look back and realize you were never truly alive. Be present, not because it's convenient, but because it's sacred. Because your life is too precious to sleep through it. Because the now is not just where your life begins, it's where your soul wakes up. 7. True strength is gentle. Strength. What comes to your mind when you hear that word? Muscles, power, dominance, the ability to fight, to win, to be feared. That's what the world often teaches us. It tells us that strength is loud, that it's aggressive, that it conquers. But the more you chase this external version of strength, the more hollow you feel inside. Because no matter how much power you gain, if it comes from the need to dominate or protect your ego, you're not truly strong, you're just afraid of appearing weak. Buddhism teaches a different kind of strength. A quieter kind, a deeper kind. A strength that doesn't need to raise its voice, control anyone, or prove anything. It is the strength of stillness, the strength of gentleness, the strength of a heart that knows how to remain open even when it's been hurt. Gentleness is not weakness. In fact, it's one of the most powerful forces in existence. A gentle person is not someone who lacks courage, they are someone who has faced pain without letting it poison their spirit. They are someone who has every reason to be bitter, closed, or hard, but instead chooses to remain soft. That takes real strength. Because it's easy to become angry when you've been hurt. It's easy to shut down, to lash out, to react with force, but to pause, to breathe, to respond with patience and wisdom. That requires deep mastery over your own emotions. That is strength. The Buddha didn't conquer lands. He didn't lead armies. He didn't command power through fear. And yet his presence was so powerful, so profound, that thousands of people followed him not out of fear, but out of deep respect and inner awakening. Why? Because his strength wasn't in his ability to overpower others. His strength was in his ability to remain rooted, calm and wise, no matter what chaos surrounded him. When others argued, he listened. When people mocked him, he smiled. When they accused him, he remained silent, not because he had nothing to say, but because he had nothing to prove. This is true strength, the ability to remain balanced when everything around you is trying to pull you off center. It's the strength to choose peace when your ego wants revenge, to choose patience when your anger demands reaction, to walk away when your pride wants to stay and fight. It's the strength to stay kind in a world that often rewards cruelty. And it's the strength to remain gentle, not because you're weak, but because you've outgrown the need to be harsh. Think of water. It is soft. It is gentle. And yet, over time, it carves through mountains. It moves around obstacles without resistance. It adapts, flows, nourishes, and yet nothing is more powerful. Water teaches us that true strength is flexible, not rigid. It doesn't resist, it adjusts. It doesn't shout, it moves with quiet certainty. And in its quietness, it transforms everything it touches. You too can live like water. You too can be soft without being broken. You can be gentle without being powerless. In Buddhist practice, this strength comes from equanimity, the ability to hold both joy and sorrow without being destroyed by either. It's the ability to sit with life as it is, without needing to control it. To face hardship with an open heart. To witness cruelty without becoming cruel. It is not about pretending that pain doesn't exist. It's about learning not to let pain harden you. It's about letting your suffering refine you, not define you. This kind of strength is forged in silence, in discipline, in sitting with yourself when your emotions are raging and choosing not to be controlled by them. It's found in the decision to respond from wisdom rather than impulse, in the choice to be aware of your inner storms, but not become them. You don't have to raise your voice to be heard. You don't have to crush others to feel powerful. You don't have to win every argument to know your truth. Sometimes, walking away with grace is the loudest answer. Sometimes, smiling in the face of hostility is the strongest move. The world may not always understand this strength. People may mistake your gentleness for weakness. They may test your boundaries. They may try to provoke you. But remember, their chaos does not need to become yours. Their noise does not need to steal your silence. And their aggression does not need to shape your response. You are not here to match their energy. You are here to master your own. True strength is quiet. It does not seek the spotlight. It does not need to be seen or praised. It simply exists, steady and unshakable, like a mountain beneath the sky. And when the world is in chaos, people seek that mountain. They seek the one who does not collapse, who does not scream, who simply remains. Be that mountain. The strongest person is not the one who controls others, it is the one who controls themselves, who holds their center in the middle of conflict, who speaks with purpose, not pride, who chooses compassion, even when they have every reason not to. That person carries a strength the world cannot understand, but deeply needs. And that person you can choose to become that. Not tomorrow, not when life gets easier, but right now, in this very breath. So be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with others. Walk softly, but stand firmly in your values. Speak kindly, but stay rooted in your truth. Forgive, not because they deserve it, but because your heart deserves peace. This is not weakness. This is sacred strength. And the more you live from that space, the more unshakable, unbreakable, and deeply alive you become. 8. The path to a better you is the path back to yourself. You've been taught all your life that becoming better means becoming someone else stronger, richer, more successful, more admired, more productive. From childhood, you were given a script. Study hard, work harder, achieve more, be liked, be chosen, be worthy in the eyes of the world. And without realizing it, you began chasing a version of yourself that didn't even come from your own soul. You started measuring your value by comparisons. You started losing yourself trying to fit into shapes that never felt quite right. You tried to become better, but with each achievement, each approval, each goal reached, something still felt missing. That better version of you that you were chasing was always just one step ahead, always slipping through your fingers. And the harder you ran toward it, the further you drifted away from your truth. Buddhism doesn't tell you to become someone else. It tells you to return to the self you were before the world told you who to be. It reminds you that the answers you're looking for are not in the future, not in someone else's hands, and not in the validation of society. They're inside you, buried under years of conditioning, waiting patiently for your attention. This path to a better you is not a race forward, it's a peeling back, a shedding, a homecoming. And it begins the moment you stop running from yourself and start sitting with yourself. You are not broken, you are not lost. You are simply covered in expectations, in fears, in roles you were taught to play. And underneath it all, there is a stillness, a clarity, a presence that has never been touched by the noise of the world. That presence is your true self, not the self that seeks applause, not the self that needs to constantly prove its worth, but the self that simply is. Pure awareness, unshaken peace, deep, silent strength. That self cannot be improved. It can only be remembered. This is why Buddhist practice is not about addition, it's about subtraction. Not doing more, but doing less. Less reacting, less pretending, less clinging, less running. It's about simplifying your life so you can finally hear the truth of your own being. It's about learning to sit with your thoughts without being consumed by them, to feel your emotions without being drowned in them, to face your shadows without fearing them, and most importantly, to trust that within you is already everything you need. The world is loud. It constantly tells you that you are not enough, that you need this product, this title, this relationship, this makeover, this one more thing, and then you'll be happy. But Buddhist wisdom cuts through the illusion. It says, you are enough. You were always enough. You've just been distracted from yourself. In chasing the future, you've abandoned the present. In trying to become somebody, you've forgotten how to be. The path back to yourself is not always easy. It requires silence. It requires stillness. It requires facing parts of you that you've avoided for years, the wounds, the fears, the disappointments. But in facing them, you find freedom. Because you realize that those wounds are not who you are, they are what you've survived. You realize your strength was never in pretending everything was okay. It was in sitting down with your truth and holding it with compassion. When you walk this path, you stop needing external things to define your worth. You don't need applause to feel valuable. You don't need success to feel capable. You don't need to wear a mask to be accepted. You begin to feel whole from within. You begin to wake up in the morning without the weight of performance. You begin to walk through the world without fear of judgment, because you are not trying to be someone else anymore. You are simply being you, and that is more than enough. This is the deepest transformation, not the kind that makes you louder, but the kind that makes you quieter inside. Not the kind that makes you more powerful in the eyes of others, but the kind that makes you more peaceful in your own soul. The kind of transformation that doesn't look impressive on the outside, but feels liberating on the inside. The kind that changes your relationship with life, with people, with yourself. You stop needing to control everything. You start trusting the flow. You stop looking for answers out there. You start listening to the wisdom inside. You stop chasing love. You start becoming love. This is not about arrival. It's about awakening. Awakening to the fact that who you are, beneath the noise, beneath the fear, beneath the striving, is already whole, already worthy, already divine. And once you taste this truth, your life will never be the same, because you'll stop looking for yourself in all the wrong places. You'll stop trying to impress a world that doesn't even know your soul. You'll stop abandoning yourself just to be accepted. The better you is not some ideal version of you that lives in the future. The better you is the version of you that lives in truth, in presence, in stillness. The better you is not the one who finally has everything figured out. It's the one who finally stopped pretending they had to. The better you doesn't begin with achieving more. It begins with remembering more. Remembering your essence, remembering your breath, remembering your worth, your peace, your light. So, return to yourself, not as a task, but as a sacred invitation. Sit with yourself, not to fix what's broken, but to see what's true. Breathe, not to escape the world, but to re-enter it fully. Be still, not because you're lazy, but because in stillness, everything false falls away. And all that remains is the quiet, undeniable truth. You've always been enough. You've always been complete. You've always been home. 9. The journey doesn't begin with more, it begins with less. We are taught to believe that growth is about adding more knowledge, more possessions, more achievements, more followers, more effort, more hustle. The world conditions us to believe that happiness is somewhere out there, just beyond the next goal, the next paycheck, the next version of ourselves. And so, we run, we chase, we accumulate. We build our lives higher and higher, stacking titles, roles, and expectations like bricks. But the higher we build, the more disconnected we feel. Because in our rush to gain more, we never stop to ask, what is all this weight doing to my soul? Buddhism offers a radical, almost rebellious truth in a world addicted to consumption. The journey of becoming better does not begin with gaining more. It begins with letting go. It begins with subtracting what is false so that what is real can finally be seen. It begins not by adding more noise to an already loud mind, but by removing the unnecessary thoughts, the false identities, the inner clutter that keeps you from peace. It is the quiet process of peeling back layer after layer of who you are not until you finally arrive at who you are. You don't need to become more impressive. You don't need to do more just to feel worthy. You don't need to earn love, earn rest, or earn permission to slow down. You were never meant to be an endless project. You were meant to be a presence, a living being, not a performance. And yet we forget this, and we overfill our lives until there's no room left to breathe. Think about it. When was the last time you felt truly light? Not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, mentally. When was the last time you didn't feel pressured to prove something, to plan something, to fix something? When was the last time you sat with yourself, without trying to change yourself? That space, the one that feels so rare's, where real transformation lives. And it cannot be reached by doing more. It can only be reached by doing less. Letting go is uncomfortable because it asks you to face silence. It asks you to face what remains when you're no longer distracted, when you start to release the opinions you've attached your identity to, when you stop carrying relationships that drain you, when you clear out goals that don't come from your soul but from comparison, when you set down the need to be busy just to feel valuable. All of these things feel terrifying to let go of at first, because for so long they've given you a sense of control. But control is not peace. Clinging is not clarity. The more you hold, the less space you have to receive what truly matters. The Buddhist path teaches that peace is not hidden in some distant future. It is always here, always available, but it is covered. Covered by craving, by fear, by attachment, by endless doing. And only by subtracting these layers gently, patiently, with awareness can peace begin to emerge. You don't find peace, you uncover it. It was never gone. You just forgot how to be still enough to feel it. This is why monks and spiritual seekers often live such simple lives, not because they are denying life, but because they are making space for what's real. They are not chasing stimulation. They are cultivating stillness, not as a punishment, but as a path. A quiet, courageous path that removes the extra weight from the mind and makes room for the present moment to unfold in full color. You don't need to abandon your responsibilities or escape into the mountains to live this truth. You begin right where you are. You begin by asking, What can I release today? What thought no longer serves me? What habit drains me more than it helps me? What expectation weighs on my shoulders? What emotion am I avoiding that needs my attention, not my escape? And as you answer these questions, not all at once, but gently, honestly, you begin to dissolve the unnecessary. You begin to feel lighter, not because the world changed, but because your relationship with it did. And in that lightness, something beautiful happens. Your breath deepens, your mind quiets, your heart opens, you stop rushing, you start noticing. You begin to walk slower, speak softer, listen more deeply. You begin to make space for reflection, for truth, for peace. You don't feel the need to fill every silence. You start to cherish it. You don't feel the need to fix every problem. You start to trust life's timing. You don't feel the need to impress others. You start to feel safe just being yourself. This is the sacred art of subtraction, the subtle power of clearing out what no longer serves your path. And the more you subtract, the more you begin to shine, not because you're trying, but because nothing is left to block your light. You begin to live not in reaction to life, but in harmony with it. You become still, not stuck, empty, not lost, quiet, not absent. And in that silence, the truth of who you are begins to bloom. So remember this: becoming better is not a race toward more. It is a return to less. Less fear, less noise, less pretending, less weight. Less of what isn't you, so that more of you can finally be felt. Start there. Release what isn't real. Let go of what no longer fits. Unclench your fists, soften your heart, and surrender your need to become, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for your soul is not to rise higher, but to release deeper. Let me know when you're ready for Lesson 9, and I'll continue this transformation journey in the same deeply reflective and powerful style. 10. Peace doesn't come from outside, it begins within. Most people spend their entire lives searching for peace in places where it can never truly be found. They chase the perfect relationship, the perfect job, the perfect home, the perfect version of their future, believing that if they can just arrange everything out there exactly right, they will finally feel calm in here. But peace is not found in perfectly controlled circumstances. It is not found in the next vacation, the next partner, the next promotion, or even the next spiritual high. It is not something the world hands to you when you finally deserve it. Peace is not given. Peace is created. And the truth is, it begins and ends within you. Buddhism teaches us that the source of suffering is not the outside world, it is the way we relate to it. Two people can go through the same experience. One is destroyed by it, the other is deepened. One feels broken, the other feels awakened. What's the difference? The state of their inner world. If your mind is constantly judging, resisting, reacting, and clinging, then no matter how perfect your outer life becomes, peace will slip through your fingers like smoke. But if your mind is trained to be still, to observe, to accept, and to release, then even in the middle of hardship, you can remain calm like the eye of a storm. We often think, I'll be at peace when things calm down. But life rarely calms down. Life continues moving. People disappoint you. Plans fail. Emotions rise. The future remains uncertain. If your peace depends on circumstances being ideal, then you have placed your power in the hands of things you cannot control. And that is a recipe for endless instability. Real peace is not about fixing everything. It's about finding stillness even when things are not fixed. It's about sitting with your own discomfort without needing to escape. It's about being okay with not knowing and trusting anyway. It's about creating an inner environment so rooted, so calm, so present that no outer event can uproot you. But this kind of peace doesn't just happen. It must be cultivated daily, patiently, gently. It starts with awareness, with noticing the small ways you abandon your peace, the urge to argue, the need to be right, the obsession with control, the endless craving for more. It starts by recognizing the patterns in your own mind that generate conflict, judgment, comparison, resistance, fear. And once you see them, you don't fight them, you sit with them. You observe them like passing clouds. You learn not to react. You begin to breathe. You begin to choose. You begin to understand that peace is not passive. It is powerful. It is not the absence of emotion, but the ability to feel fully without being consumed. It is not silence around you, but silence within you. A steady presence. A quiet knowing that whatever arises, you can remain grounded. You can face it, feel it, and still come home to yourself. That is inner peace, not escape, but embodiment. Not denial, but awareness. Not force, but surrender. The Buddha never taught that peace would come through status or success. He taught that it arises through understanding the mind, through knowing yourself, through learning to sit in stillness and see clearly, through realizing that the mind creates suffering when it clings, when it resists, when it refuses to let go, and that the same mind, when trained in awareness, can dissolve that suffering without changing a single thing around you. You don't need a perfect life to be at peace. You need a practiced mind, a mind that knows how to return to the breath, a heart that knows how to soften in the face of discomfort, a body that learns to carry tension with grace until it dissolves, a spirit that no longer needs to fight everything it doesn't understand. That is peace. And that kind of peace cannot be stolen, because it was never built on anything external. And yes, the world may never validate this path. It may continue telling you that peace lies in buying more, achieving more, controlling more. But look closely. Does that path ever deliver what it promises? Or does it keep moving the finish line? Does it keep you running and running, only to find yourself back at the same place, tired, anxious, disconnected? Your peace is not waiting in the future. It's not hiding in a person or a possession. It's not buried in your success. It's waiting in this moment, in your breath, in your awareness, in your willingness to be here, fully and without resistance. It's waiting in your ability to let go of needing things to be perfect, and instead finding joy in their imperfection. It's waiting in your decision to sit with your fears, not as enemies, but as messengers. It's waiting in your ability to say, I don't need life to be easy. I need to meet it with calm. So slow down, close your eyes, take a deep breath, let go of what doesn't belong in this moment. Release the future for now. Forgive the past. Come home to this breath, this body, this awareness. This is the doorway to peace. Note tomorrow, not later, but now. In this exact second. The more often you return here, the more you will see that nothing outside of you needs to change for you to be at peace. Only your relationship to the present moment. This is not theory, it is truth. And when you taste it, when you live it, everything changes. You begin to walk through life no longer afraid of chaos. You begin to respond instead of react. You begin to listen with presence, to love with openness, to breathe with intention. You begin to carry a stillness inside of you so strong that no storm can move it. And that stillness is your strength. That stillness is your freedom. That stillness is your home. 11. Lasting transformation comes from inner discipline, not outer motivation. Motivation is like a spark. It feels powerful when it arrives, an adrenaline rush of hope, a sudden surge of possibility. You watch a video, hear a speech, read a quote, and for a moment, you feel invincible. You believe this time it will be different. This time you will rise early, eat better, meditate daily, overcome your pain, master your emotions. But a few days pass, reality returns, the spark fades, the same thoughts creep in, the same habits resurface. And before you even realize it, you've returned to the same patterns, wondering why you can't stay consistent, why nothing seems to last. This is the great illusion of motivation. It feels like fuel, but it burns too fast. It's a visitor, not a foundation. Buddhism never teaches you to chase emotional highs. It teaches you to build inner discipline, quiet, grounded commitment to practice, whether you feel like it or not. It tells you plainly, the path is not easy. The mind will resist. The ego will fight. But the way forward is not found in waiting for the right mood. It is found in walking anyway, breath by breath, step by step, especially when it's hard. True transformation, the kind that lasts, the kind that changes the shape of your shoulders, and come from intensity. It comes from consistency. It doesn't come from passion alone. It comes from discipline, from waking up when it's inconvenient, from sitting in silence even when the mind is loud, from making time for practice even when life is chaotic, from breathing through discomfort instead of running from it. This is not glamorous, it's not dramatic, but it is powerful, it is real, and it is the only path that leads to true freedom. Discipline is not about forcing yourself or punishing yourself. It's not about being harsh or rigid. In Buddhism, discipline is a form of compassion, a sacred structure you build to protect your peace. It is the act of honoring your path, even when your emotions try to pull you away from it. Because emotions change, thoughts change, moods change. But your commitment to awakening, if it's rooted in awareness, can remain steady through it all. Think of a tree. When the winds are calm, the tree doesn't need deep roots. But when the storm comes, only the tree with strong roots survives. Your discipline is those roots. When the storm of emotion comes, when doubt arrives, when laziness whispers, when old wounds reopen, your roots are what keep you grounded. Without them, you'll be blown in every direction. With them, you bend but never break. Every time you choose discipline over distraction, you carve a new path in your mind. You train your nervous system to stop seeking quick comfort and start resting in long-term peace. You begin to trust yourself, not because you always feel strong, but because you know how to return. Again and again, you return to the breath, to the silence, to the practice, to the present. This returning, this quiet persistence, is what builds a new version of you, not all at once, but gradually, like the rising of the sun. And yes, the world around you may still tell you to chase motivation, to seek dopamine highs, quick hacks, instant results. But Buddhist wisdom reminds you that anything gained quickly fades quickly. True growth is slow, it is patient, it is subtle. And that's why it's so rare, because most people give up too soon. They wait to feel inspired before they act. But the path of awakening doesn't wait. It moves forward, regardless of how the ego feels. You don't need to feel ready. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to take the next small step right now. Sit down to meditate, even if your mind resists. Take the walk, drink the water. Say no to what steals your energy. Breathe before you react. Speak less. Observe more. Forgive again. Choose the path again and again. That is the real strength, not in how loud you shout about change, but in how quietly and consistently you embody it when no one is watching. And yes, there will be days when you slip, days when the old habits creep back in, days when you forget everything and fall back into unconsciousness. That's part of the journey. What matters is not how many times you fall, but how often you return. Can you pick yourself back up without judgment? Can you meet your setbacks with awareness instead of shame? Can you keep going? Not because it's easy, but because it's right. Discipline is devotion. It is love in action. It is your soul saying, I am worthy of showing up for. And the more you practice it, the more peaceful you become, because life is perfect, but because your relationship with it has changed. You no longer chase moments of motivation. You become the source of your own strength. You no longer rely on the world to carry you. You learn to walk with your own steady feet. Eventually, you look around and realize you didn't just change your habits, you changed your identity. You became someone who no longer lives at the mercy of impulse, of emotion, of mood. You became someone who responds with awareness, who rests in presence, who lives with integrity. And that version of you, the one who shows up every day not to be perfect, but to be present, is the version who is free. So, stop waiting for motivation, stop chasing feelings. Begin today. Begin small, but begin. Because lasting transformation is not about a breakthrough moment, it is about who you choose to become, in the quiet, in the ordinary, in the sacred repetition of doing what's needed over and over, until it becomes who you are. 12. Freedom is found in letting life flow, not in controlling it. For most of your life, you were taught that the way to succeed, to feel safe, to find happiness, is to control everything around you. You were told to plan every detail, to fix every problem, to manage outcomes, to push harder when things resist. And so you did. You built systems. You mapped your future. You rehearsed conversations in your mind. You obsessed over what others thought of you. You lived on high alert, constantly trying to shape life into what you wanted it to be. And for a while, it may have worked. Control gave you a sense of security. It gave you the illusion that you were in charge. But beneath that illusion, something else began to grow: exhaustion, anxiety, fear, tension in your chest that never really went away. Because deep down you knew the truth. Life cannot be controlled. It can be managed, guided, respected, but never truly controlled. Plans fall apart. People change. The weather shifts. Emotions rise and fall without warning. The future refuses to obey your timeline. And no matter how tightly you grip, life moves in its own rhythm. Buddhism teaches that the path to true peace, true clarity, and true liberation is not found in tightening your hold. It's found in learning to let go. It's found in surrender, in learning how to flow with life rather than fight it. Letting go is not giving up. It's not weakness. It's not passive. In fact, it's one of the strongest things you can do. It takes immense courage to stop resisting. It takes real inner maturity to admit that you can't control the uncontrollable and you were never meant to. Letting go is choosing to participate in life with awareness, not domination. It's choosing to trust that things are unfolding the way they need to, even if you don't understand them right now. It's trusting that the detour might actually be the destination, that the loss might be the beginning of a deeper gain, that what you didn't expect might carry what you've always needed. So many people live trapped not by their circumstances, but by their need to control those circumstances. They micromanage their relationships, suffocate their dreams with timelines, and punish themselves for every outcome they can't predict. But what if the freedom you're searching for isn't in controlling more, it's in releasing more? What if your greatest peace is found not by getting everything right, but by loosening your grip and letting life breathe? When a river flows downstream, it does not force its way around every rock. It does not try to move the mountain. It simply flows. It bends. It softens. It adapts. And in that surrender, it finds power. Eventually, it carves through stone not with aggression, but with persistence and patience. That's how you can live too. When things don't go your way, you can either harden, tense, and break, or you can soften, breathe, and flow. Flowing does not mean you don't care. It means you no longer cling. It means you accept that the present moment is already what it is, and from that acceptance, you act with clarity instead of panic. In Buddhist practice, non-attachment is not indifference. It is freedom. Freedom from the emotional chaos that comes with trying to control what is beyond your power. It is learning to care deeply while holding loosely, to love fully without possessing, to show up with intention without demanding results, to offer your best effort without tying your worth to the outcome. That is freedom. That is flow. And the beautiful thing is, once you stop trying to control life, life starts to feel lighter. Your mind becomes quieter. You stop overthinking every decision. You start trusting your intuition. You begin moving through your days with a sense of grounded openness. You still work, you still plan, but you no longer suffer when things don't go exactly your way. You begin to trust life not blindly, but wisely, because you've seen how forcing things only creates resistance. And you've started to understand that peace doesn't come from controlling life, it comes from cooperating with it. This shift doesn't happen overnight. You won't wake up one day and stop needing control completely, but slowly, through awareness and practice, you'll begin to notice when control shows up. You'll feel it in your body, the tightening, the tension, the restlessness, and instead of feeding it, you'll breathe. You'll pause. You'll ask yourself, what am I afraid of? You'll meet that fear with presence. You'll make room for uncertainty. You'll let things be unclear and let yourself be okay anyway. That's how you learn to flow. You will still set goals, but you will not become a prisoner of them. You will still love, but you will not demand that love obey your rules. You will still build your life, but you will allow it to grow in unexpected directions. And when setbacks come, and they will, you will no longer fall apart. You will adapt, you will bend, you will breathe. Because your peace is no longer rooted in outcomes. It is rooted in your ability to stay present with what is. This is the deep wisdom of the Buddhist path. It invites you to release your grip on how things should be, so you can finally open your hands to how things actually are. And in that space between what you wanted and what is, you begin to live fully. Not with fear, but with trust. Not with control, but with clarity. Not with resistance, but with flow. So ask yourself, what are you holding too tightly? What outcome have you attached your peace to? What person, plan, or idea are you trying to force to match your expectations? And who would you become if you let it go no with resentment, but with faith? What kind of life would open up for you if you stopped pushing and started trusting? You don't need to fix every detail. You don't need to predict every step. You don't need to make life bend to your will. You only need to meet life as it comes, with open hands, a calm mind, and a heart rooted in presence. That is how you move from fear to freedom. That is how you stop surviving and start flowing. That is how you finally, deeply, and truly become free. 13. You don't need to be fixed, you need to be fully seen. There is a quiet lie that has been planted deep inside almost every human being. A belief that you are broken, that you are somehow not enough as you are, that something inside you needs to be fixed, repaired, upgraded, improved, replaced. You carry this belief silently, perhaps without realizing it. It shows up when you over-apologize for who you are, when you hide your emotions out of fear that they're too much, when you doubt your worth unless it's being validated by someone else. It shows up in your endless striving, trying to prove you're good enough by becoming more productive, more attractive, more successful, more spiritual. You search, you hustle, you self-analyze, hoping that one day you'll reach a version of yourself that finally deserves to be loved, to be accepted, to rest. But what if the truth is this? You were never broken to begin with. What if the thing you've been trying to fix all your life was never broken, only buried? What if your anxiety is not a flaw, but a signal from a wounded part of you asking to be heard? What if your sadness is not a malfunction, but a messenger? What if your insecurity isn't proof that something is wrong, but an invitation to come home to the places inside you that haven't been loved yet? Buddhism doesn't teach that you are broken. It teaches that you are clouded, that the suffering you feel does not come from your essence, but from the layers of ignorance, fear, ego, and conditioning that have settled over it. It teaches that your true self is already whole, already peaceful, already luminous. You do not need to add anything to become yourself. You need to uncover what was always there. You don't heal by fixing yourself like a machine. You heal by becoming more intimate with yourself, by seeing yourself fully, by turning toward your inner pain with compassion rather than shame. The parts of you that feel unworthy are not asking to be erased, they're asking to be held. They are younger versions of you, trapped in time, still carrying stories and wounds from years ago. They don't need judgment, they don't need fixing. They need you to show up. They need your presence. They need your truth. But this is where most people struggle, because truly seeing yourself means facing what you've spent years avoiding. It means feeling the grief you've pushed down, the anger you've learned to suppress, the shame you've tried to cover with perfectionism. It means meeting the parts of yourself that were labeled too sensitive, too emotional, too messy, and learning to say, no, you're not too much. You're just not yet fully met. In the Buddhist tradition, healing begins with awareness, not judgment, not improvement, just awareness. Can you sit with your sadness without trying to fix it? Can you feel your fear without trying to silence it? Can you hold space for your loneliness without rushing to distract yourself from it? Can you witness your mind without becoming entangled in its stories? Because something beautiful happens when you do. When you stop running from yourself, you start to see that nothing inside you is as scary as your avoidance made it seem. You start to see your inner child, the one who tried to be perfect to avoid punishment, the one who learned to stay quiet, to be accepted, the one who was taught to be strong instead of safe. And as you sit with that child, not trying to fix them, but simply listening, your heart begins to open, your nervous system begins to relax, the walls begin to fall, and healing begins to flow. This is not a quick process. It is not a one-time epiphany. It is a lifelong practice of choosing presence over performance, compassion over criticism, being over becoming. It is the daily decision to stop abandoning yourself every time you feel uncomfortable, to stop outsourcing your worth, to stop waiting to be healed before you allow yourself to be loved. You are not a project. You are a person, a soul, a sacred being, and the moment you allow yourself to be fully seen, exactly as you are, the burden of being better begins to dissolve. And here's the miracle. When you stop trying to fix yourself, you naturally begin to change. Not because you're forcing transformation, but because safety creates openness. Openness creates awareness. Awareness creates healing. Healing brings integration, and integration brings growth. Real, embodied, sustainable growth. The kind of growth that doesn't come from fear, but from love. From choosing to be with yourself fully, moment by moment, no matter what arises. You don't need to be more disciplined before you deserve peace. You don't need to be more confident before you deserve love. You don't need to be more healed before you deserve rest. The version of you that exists right now, the one who still struggles, who still overthinks, who still carries scarcity, the same version that is worthy of compassion, worthy of gentleness, worthy of grace. You are already enough, not once you're fixed. Now, So stop chasing the version of you who never makes mistakes, who never feels weak, who always gets it right. That version is a fantasy, born from a world that profits off your self-doubt. Instead, turn inward. Breathe, soften, listen. Meet yourself exactly where you are, without rushing to change. Offer yourself the same tenderness you offer a loved one, the same patience you give to a child, the same forgiveness you would give to anyone you truly saw with an open heart. Because that's what you've been longing for all along, not to be improved, but to be seen. Not to be perfect, but to be real. Not to become someone else, but to come home to yourself. Your healing is not a destination. It is a relationship, a practice, a quiet unfolding. And every time you choose to sit with yourself instead of escape, you are already healing. You don't need to be fixed. You need to be felt. You need to be heard. You need to be welcomed back into your own presence. And when you begin to live from that space, from the truth that nothing inside you is too much, too broken, or too far gone, you stop searching for peace because you've become it. 14. Stillness is where your power lives. In a world that glorifies noise, motion, and constant achievement, stillness is often misunderstood. It's mistaken for laziness, weakness, or lack of ambition. If you're not moving, the world assumes you're falling behind. If you're not hustling, it assumes you've lost your edge. But the truth, the deeper, more ancient truth is this. Stillness is not the absence of power. Stillness is power. Stillness is not where you stop growing, it's where you begin waking up. It's where clarity rises, where wisdom speaks, where peace takes root, where your real strength finally comes. Live not in how fast you can move, but in how deeply you can remain. Buddhism teaches that the still mind is not a passive mind, it is a mastered one. A mind that no longer reacts blindly to every emotion, every thought, every trigger. A mind that has learned the sacred art of pausing. In stillness, you are not frozen, you are focused. You are not stuck, you are centered. You are not silent because you have nothing to say. You are silent because you no longer need to shout to be heard. You no longer need to chase every voice, defend every opinion, or prove yourself in every room. You've stepped outside the chaos not by escaping it, but by finding the quiet place within you that no chaos can touch. When the Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree, he didn't fight, he didn't run, he didn't force change. He stayed. He remained unmoved, facing every temptation of the mind, every fear, every illusion, and in that stillness, he awakened. That wasn't weakness, that wasn't idleness. That was power in its purest form. The ability to remain, to observe, to endure discomfort without becoming it, to face the storms of the world without letting them uproot your inner peace. The world has forgotten this kind of power, but you can remember it. Your strength is not in how loudly you speak, it's in how calmly you listen. Your courage is not in how hard you push, it's in how softly you allow. Your mastery is not in how much you control, it's in how gracefully you respond. Stillness is not something you earn after fixing your life. It is something you choose right now, as it is, in the middle of noise, in the middle of uncertainty, in the middle of everything that feels unfinished and unresolved. Stillness says, I will not be rushed by fear. I will not be bullied by pressure. I will not collapse every time life doesn't go my way. I will sit, I will breathe, I will wait, and I will respond from wisdom, not from panic. This kind of stillness must be practiced. It is not the default of the untrained mind. The untrained mind is restless. It runs from silence. It searches for distraction. It seeks entertainment, validation, comfort. But the more you meditate, the more you return to your breath, the more you simply sit and breathe, more you begin to feel something shift. Your nervous system begins to slow down. Your inner noise starts to soften. Your thoughts still come, but you are no longer their puppet. You are their witness. And in that witnessing, in that observing presence, you discover what has been buried beneath the noise all along: power. Not the power to manipulate the world, but the power to be unmoved by it. Not the power to always win, but the power to walk away when you lose without losing your peace. Not the power to force your will onto life, but the power to surrender to its unfolding, trusting that what is meant for you will come when you're ready, and not a second sooner. In stillness, you stop being a prisoner of your emotions. You stop being hijacked by your moods. You stop reacting to life with the same old habits. You begin choosing, consciously, with presence, with clarity. And from that place, your entire life changes. You begin to speak less, but with more impact. You begin to move slower, but with more purpose. You begin to love without clinging, give without resentment, hold space without exhaustion. You begin to walk through life not as someone who needs to chase validation, but as someone who has rooted themselves in inner truth. This is not the stillness of retreat or escape. It is the stillness of presence, of confidence, of deep, quiet power. Imagine walking into a room and not needing to impress anyone because your peace speaks louder than your words. Imagine being in conflict and not needing to shout because your stillness makes people listen. Imagine facing failure and not collapsing because your worth is no longer tied to outcomes. That's the kind of strength that comes from stillness. It's unshakable, it's untouchable, and it cannot be taken away from you because it was never dependent on anything outside of you. But this strength takes time. It is built in moments when no one is watching. It's built in your early morning sits, in your quiet breathing, in your pauses before reacting, in your choice to take a walk instead of sending that angry message, in your decision to listen to discomfort instead of distracting from it. It is built one moment of stillness at a time, and over time, that stillness becomes your anchor. It becomes your guide. It becomes your most powerful weapon, not because it fights, but because it refuses to fight needlessly. The world around you will keep spinning. People will keep shouting. Problems will keep coming. But you will remain. Not frozen, but fully awake. Not passive, but deeply aware. And in that awareness, you will begin to see what others miss. You will begin to live in a different dimension, not above the world, but deeper within it. Every moment becomes richer. Every breath becomes sacred. Every conversation becomes a chance to respond from truth instead of ego. Stillness is not a luxury. It is a necessity. It is not a break from life. It is how you return to it with power. It is the inner sanctuary you carry with you, no matter where you go. It's not something you wait for. It's something you create. You create it by choosing not to rush, by choosing not to react, by choosing to slow down when everything around you speeds up. And when you do, you realize something astonishing. The world was never in your way. Your reactivity was, your busyness was, your restlessness was. And now that you've found stillness, you've found freedom. Because in that stillness, you've returned to the most powerful place you could ever be, not in control, not in resistance, not in performance, but in presence. Fully here, fully now, and fully alive. 15. Healing begins the moment you stop running from yourself. For so long, you've been running. Maybe not in the way others see. On the outside, you've smiled. You've worked hard. You've shown up. But inside, you've been sprinting from emotion to distraction, from pain to performance, from one unfinished part of yourself to another, hoping that if you just keep moving fast enough, you'll eventually outrun the parts of yourself that feel too heavy to face. You've buried the grief, you've silenced the sadness, You've numbed the fear. You've packed all your unhealed emotions into the corners of your mind, hoping they'll disappear if you just stay busy, if you just stay positive, if you just stay focused on becoming someone better, someone newer, someone cleaner than the version of you that still feels broken. But the truth is, no matter how fast you run, your pain runs with you. It waits in the silence. It hides behind your achievements. It follows you into every new relationship, every job, every place you think will offer relief. It speaks through your exhaustion. It whispers in your anxiety. It lingers in your restlessness. And no matter how much you try to push it away, it keeps calling you not to punish you, but to heal you, not to drag you backward, but to invite you inward. Buddhism teaches that suffering doesn't just come from pain, it comes from resistance to pain. The more you resist, the deeper your wounds grow. The more you distract, the more those wounds control you, without you even knowing it. The more you chase outer change, the more inner turmoil piles up, untouched. But healing does not begin when the pain disappears. Healing begins the moment you stop running, when you pause long enough to hear your own breath, when you sit still long enough to notice the tightness in your chest, when you let the tears rise, and for once, you don't wipe them away, you let them fall. That is the moment healing begins. Not because you fixed anything, but because you stopped pretending you were fine. True healing requires courage, not the kind of courage that fights the world, but the kind that sits down and says, I'm ready to feel this. Courage to face your sadness without judging it. Courage to meet your anger without fearing it. Courage to sit in your aloneness without filling it with noise. You don't need to be brave in the way you think, holding everything together, keeping up the mask. You need to be brave enough to fall apart in the right way, in the right place, at the right time. And that time is now. Not when life calms down, not when you become perfect. Now. Healing doesn't ask you to fix everything. It asks you to feel everything. That sadness you keep pushing away. It's a story that never got to be told. That fear you keep ignoring. It's a part of you that learned to protect itself in a world that didn't feel safe. That shame you carry so quietly. It's a wound that needs your love, not your silence. And you don't need to figure out how to fix any of it. You just need to be present with it completely, honestly, and gently. Stillness is where this work begins. When you sit with your breath, when you stop trying to get somewhere else, when you stop performing, you give your pain permission to speak. And it will speak at first in discomfort, in racing thoughts, in memories you thought you'd forgotten. But if you stay with it, if you breathe into it, you'll begin to hear something deeper, a voice that says, I've been waiting for you. A voice that says, I'm not here to harm you. I'm here to be healed. That voice is your own. The part of you that you locked away because it was too sensitive, too angry, too afraid, too soft. That part is not your enemy. It's the key. Buddhist practice doesn't promise escape. It promises awakening. It invites you to look inside, not with judgment, but with compassion, to see that you are not your wounds, but your wounds deserve to be seen. That you are not your trauma, but your trauma deserves to be honored. That you are not your past, but your past has shaped the very ground on which your healing will now stand. And yes, this path will be hard. Not because you are weak, but because you are finally strong enough to stop running. You will want to quit. You will feel resistance. But every time you choose to stay with the breath, stay with the feeling, stay with your fuel, you are breaking a cycle that has kept you distant from your truth. You are choosing presence over numbness. You are choosing love over escape. You are choosing depth over distraction. And that choice, that return, is the most sacred act of healing there is. As you go deeper, you'll begin to feel moments of peace, not the surface-level peace that comes from having a good day, A deeper peace. A peace that says, I'm safe, even though I'm still hurting. A peace that says, I don't have to be perfect to be whole. A peace that holds you when nothing else makes sense. That peace doesn't come from outside. It comes from your decision to sit with what is, without running, without numbing, without pretending. You are not too broken. You are not too late. You are not too far gone. You are not behind. You are just finally arriving. You are just finally listening. You are just finally ready to begin, not the work of changing yourself, but the work of reuniting with yourself. Because healing isn't becoming someone new. It's coming home to the person you were before the pain taught you to run. So take a deep breath. Slow down. Stop reaching for something to distract you. Let the pain come closer. Let the silence hold you. Let your body speak. Let your soul be seen. You don't need a plan. You don't need a solution. You just need a moment, this moment where you choose, finally, to stop running and start feeling. This is where healing begins. This is where power is reclaimed. This is where your future stops being a reaction to your past and starts becoming a conscious creation from your presence. You're not here to escape yourself. You're here to remember yourself. And the remembering begins the moment you stop running and simply stay. 16. You were never lost, you were just disconnected from your own light. There are moments in life when you feel like you're lost, not geographically but spiritually, emotionally, soulfully lost. You look around and you don't recognize yourself. You look in the mirror and something feels hollow. You keep moving, but you don't know where you're going. You keep working, but you don't know why. You scroll through life, waiting for something to awaken the part of you that feels like it quietly disappeared when no one was watching. And so you whisper to yourself in the silence, I don't know who I am anymore. But Buddhism teaches that you are never truly lost. Your soul is not gone. Your truth is not erased. You have simply become disconnected from your own light. You didn't lose yourself. You were buried beneath roles, expectations, pain, pressure, and noise. You became tangled in the stories that were written for you. Maybe you were told to be strong, so you silenced your softness. Maybe you were told to be good, so you hid your truth. Maybe you were told to be perfect, so you killed your joy trying to meet impossible standards. Over time, your real self, the raw, radiant self that was once free and unafraid, began to fade into the background. Not because you failed, not because you were weak, but because you were surviving in a world that kept rewarding the mask more than the truth beneath it. And when the soul grows quiet, when the light dims, when you forget your own radiance, you begin to seek outside of yourself. You chase validation in relationships. You try to find your identity in your achievements. You search for meaning in temporary pleasures, in routines, in distractions. But nothing satisfies the emptiness. Nothing silences that deep, aching longing to feel real. Because no matter how much you gain, if you're disconnected from your own soul, it all feels like noise. The praise feels hollow. The success feels empty. The busy life feels meaningless. Because the thing you've been searching for in the world is not out there. It's you. It's always been you. The Buddhist path is not about adding something new to your life. It's about peeling away everything that isn't you. It's not about becoming someone better. It's about remembering who you were before the world made you forget. Before the trauma taught you to hide. Before the shame taught you to shrink. Before the fear taught you to run. Your true self is not something you need to become, it's something you need to uncover. And that uncovering begins the moment you stop asking the world to reflect your worth and start reconnecting to the light that's always been quietly glowing within you. This light is not loud. It does not beg for attention. It doesn't compete. It waits. It waits for silence. It waits for stillness. It waits for you to come, not physically but spiritually. It waits for you to stop performing, stop running, stop editing yourself to fit into a life that doesn't reflect your truth. It waits for you to close your eyes, take a breath, and listen not to the world, but to your own being. In that listening, you will feel a quiet warmth, a subtle peace, a soft pulse of life that says, "You're still here. I never left. You just forgot to look inside." To reconnect with your light, you must be willing to pause. To stop pouring your energy into trying to look good and start directing it into feeling whole. To stop chasing what you think will complete you and start honoring what already lives within you. You do this through presence, through meditation, through mindful breath, through conscious stillness, through returning, again and again, to the parts of you that you once abandoned. You will need to face the pain. You will need to grieve the versions of yourself you betrayed in the name of acceptance. You will need to sit in silence long enough to hear the voices you've been drowning out with noise. You will need to forgive yourself for the mistakes, for the years spent hiding, for the moments you settled for less than you deserved. And in that forgiveness, in that sacred reclamation, something begins to awaken. Not something foreign, not something outside of you, but something ancient, something holy, something real. You begin to remember the child you used to be, the one who felt wonder, who asked big questions, who laughed without shame, who cried without holding back. You begin to remember the artist inside you, the mystic, the teacher, the healer, the presence that existed before the fear, before the trauma, before the mask. And as you remember, you stop striving, you stop comparing, you stop running, and you start being, authentically, deeply, unapologetically. You realize you don't need to be more charismatic. You need to be more connected. You don't need to be more successful. You need to be more sincere. You don't need to be more disciplined. You need to be more aware of what your soul is asking for, what your body is whispering, what your intuition already knows. The answers are not waiting at the end of some massive achievement. They're waiting inside the quiet moments where you drop the performance and finally let yourself feel real. Buddhism calls this remembrance awareness, pure awareness, the state of being fully here, fully now, fully awake to the truth that you are not broken, not lost, not missing. You are light. You are presence. You are consciousness itself. Everything else, every fear, every doubt, every insecurities, simply a passing cloud. And clouds can block the sun, but they can never destroy it. So let this be your homecoming. Let this be the moment where you stop asking for someone else to validate your light and start embodying it. Let this be the breath where you drop your armor and say, "I am enough." Not because I've earned it, but because I exist. Let this be the space where you finally trust yourself, not your ego, not your fear, but your essence, the part of you that knows, without question, that you are already whole. You were never lost. You were just looking outward when the light was always within. 17. The deepest peace comes when you no longer need to prove anything. For most of your life, you've been trying to prove something. Sometimes you knew it. Other times, you didn't. You tried to prove that you were strong enough, good enough, lovable enough, capable enough, worthy enough. You tried to prove that you weren't broken, that you could make it on your own, that your pain wouldn't define you. You tried to prove it to others, your parents, your teachers, your lovers, your friends. You tried to prove it to the world that you mattered, that your presence meant something. And, maybe most painfully, you tried to prove it to yourself. You thought if you could just do enough, be enough, achieve enough, that the voice inside, the one that whispers, "You're not there yet," would finally go quiet. You thought if you reached a certain level of success, or found the right relationship, or healed your pain faster, or looked more perfect, that peace would arrive. But it didn't. Because every time you reached one finish line, your mind created another. Every time someone clapped, your ego asked for a louder applause. Every time you rested, guilt crept in to remind you that you could be doing more. The chase never ended, and so your heart never landed. Buddhism calls this the endless wheel of samsarathi, cycle of craving, becoming, clinging, and suffering. The cycle of becoming attached to external validation and hoping it will quiet the unrest within. But the truth is, no amount of proving will ever bring you peace, because peace isn't found in performance, it's found in presence. It's not found in proving who you are. It's found in remembering that you don't need to. You were not born to be a product. You were not born to be perfect. You were not born to meet every expectation placed upon your shoulders. You were born to be, to breathe, to feel, to experience this life through the vessel of your own soul, not through someone else's approval. The need to prove yourself is a trauma response. It's the echo of the moment someone made you feel like being yourself wasn't enough. It's the scar of not being seen, not being heard, not being loved unconditionally. And as long as you keep chasing external validation, you keep feeding that wound. You keep strengthening the illusion that your worth is something to be earned. But it isn't. Your worth is inherent, untouched, unconditional. Like the sun, it doesn't stop shining just because the clouds appear. It's not increased by praise or reduced by criticism. It simply is. And the more you return to yourself, the more you slow down and sit in stillness, the more you begin to feel this truth not as a concept, but as a living experience. You begin to notice that when you are no longer striving to be someone else, you feel peace. That when you let go of trying to impress others, your energy returns. That when you release the need to prove your intelligence, your success, your strength, you soften, and your soul begins to breathe. This softening is not defeat, it is power. It's the power of a heart that no longer needs armor, a mind that no longer needs defense, a soul that no longer needs to be impressive because it knows that truth is more powerful than perfection. In Buddhist teachings, silenthical conduct and samadhi concentration aren't about proving you're spiritual. They're about cultivating inner alignment. They're about living in a way that no longer fragments you, that no longer pulls you in 1,000 directions. They're about finding peace not through image, but through presence. When you stop needing to prove, something beautiful happens. You become real. Your smile becomes sincere, not strategic. Your silence becomes restful, not performative. Your words become fewer, but more meaningful. Your relationships deepen, not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because people can finally see the real youth, unedited, unmasked, unchained version of you that's been waiting for your permission to exist. This doesn't mean you stop growing. It means you stop growing for the wrong reasons. You stop improving to please others. You stop healing so you can appear strong. You stop achieving just to be seen. Instead, your growth becomes rooted in joy, in curiosity, in truth. You wake up and meditate not to prove you're disciplined, but because your soul craves stillness. You eat well, not to look a certain way, but because your body deserves nourishment. You rest not because you've earned it, but because rest is your birthright. You speak not to be right, but to be honest. You listen not to respond, but to understand. This kind of life is quiet. It's not always flashy. It may not be admired by everyone, but it is deeply peaceful, because you're no longer betraying yourself. You're no longer carrying the exhausting weight of someone else's standards. You're no longer outsourcing your self-worth. You are simply here inhabiting your life, your body, your soul, as it is. Fully, gently, authentically. And yes, you will still be triggered. The world will still try to pull you back into the game of proving, but now you'll recognize it. You'll pause. You'll breathe. You'll say, I don't need to prove anything today. I only need to be present. You'll return to your center. You'll move from awareness, not anxiety, from clarity, not comparison, from wholeness, not hunger. Because when you truly understand who you are beneath the roles, beneath the performance, beneath the striving, when you touch that part of you that is simply awake, aware, alive, you stop seeking peace. You start being peace. You stop seeking love. You start being love. You stop trying to be enough, because you finally remember you already are. So let this be your permission to exhale, to let go of the tension you've carried for years, to forgive yourself for all the times you thought you had to be more just to be worthy. Let this be the breath that releases the burden of perfection. Let this be the moment you return not to a better version of yourself, but to your real self. The deepest peace is not earned, it is reclaimed. It's been waiting for you in the space behind the noise, behind the fear, behind the mask. All this time, you haven't been lost. You've just been trying too hard to be someone else. And now, you can stop, you can return, you can rest. You don't have to prove anything anymore. 18. Freedom begins when you let go of the illusion of control. From the moment you wake up, your mind tries to grasp. It tries to predict, to plan, to control, to manipulate reality into something safe, something certain. You plan your day. You check your phone. You overthink your decisions. You worry about how others see you. You hold tightly to expectations of how things should be, how people should act, how life should unfold. You want clarity. You want answers. You want the reassurance that nothing will go wrong, that no one will leave, that your efforts will not be wasted. You want life to stay within the lines you've drawn for it, clean, predictable, contained. But life was never meant to obey you, and the tighter you grip it, the more it slips through your fingers. Buddhism teaches that suffering begins the moment we resist the truth of impermanence. We suffer because we want life to hold still, to stay fixed. We want people to stay the same, emotions to stay pleasant, circumstances to stay comfortable. We attach to ideas, to plans, to versions of ourselves and others that feel safe. And when life changes as it always does, we feel betrayed. We panic. We suffer. But the suffering doesn't come from the change. It comes from the illusion that we could control it in the first place. Control is a story the ego tells to feel important, to feel secure. But that story becomes a prison. It keeps you anxious, afraid, reactive. It keeps you second-guessing your every move, blaming yourself when things fall apart, fearing the unknown like it's your enemy. And in that constant attempt to manage every outcome, you miss the beauty of life unfolding naturally. The rain doesn't ask for your permission to fall. The wind doesn't wait for your command to blow. The seasons change with or without your approval. Your breath comes and goes. Your heart beats. Your cells regenerate all without your control. And yet, you trust those things. You don't micromanage your lungs. You don't panic over every heartbeat. You let the body do what it's designed to do. Life is no different. There is an intelligence flowing through existence that is far wiser than your ego. Call it God, the Tao, the universe, karma, or simply life. It is not chaotic, it is deeply ordered in ways the mind cannot fully grasp. It does not revolve around your plans, but it always moves in service of your evolution. Sometimes that evolution looks like peace. Sometimes it looks like pain, but it is always movement toward awakening. The path is not about learning how to control life. The path is learning how to trust it. To trust that what is leaving your life is not punishment, but release. To trust that what is falling apart is not failure, but transformation. To trust that the detours, the delays, the doors that won't open are all guiding you, not to your plan, but to your truth. You were not born to control the current. You were born to learn how to flow with it, to live in harmony with it, to dance with the mystery. And that dance begins when you loosen your grip. When you stop trying to force everything to fit your timeline, your vision, your comfort zone, when you surrender not in weakness, but in wisdom. Surrender is not passive, it's not defeat. It's the courageous decision to stop arguing with reality and start cooperating with it. It's the understanding that peace doesn't come from bending life to your will, it comes from aligning your will with life. When you let go of control, you begin to breathe differently. You soften. You stop fighting yourself. You stop blaming others. You stop obsessing over the past and panicking about the future. You begin to respond instead of react. You begin to observe instead of judge. You begin to allow instead of resist. And in that allowing, you discover a deep, sacred spaciousness and inner freedom that nothing outside of you can give or take away. You start to see that you don't need to control every conversation. You only need to be honest. You don't need to control how others perceive you. You only need to be real. You don't need to control what happens tomorrow. You only need to be present today. This kind of freedom is not loud. It's quiet. It's not the freedom to do anything you want. It's the freedom to no longer be ruled by fear, by ego, by the exhausting effort to hold everything together. It's the freedom of letting go and trusting that even in the unknown, you are held, you are supported, you are safe. Because here's what control never told you. When you surrender, life doesn't fall apart, it falls into place. The doors that close were never meant for you. The people who leave were never your anchor. The dreams that die are making room for ones that truly belong to you. Life doesn't punish the ones who let go. It elevates them. It lifts them into a higher rhythm of synchronicity, of divine timing, of soul alignment. Yes, there will be discomfort. Yes, there will be fear. The ego will resist. It will panic. It will scream. If you let go, everything will collapse. But that is the final illusion. Because when you let go not of responsibility, but of control, what collapses is not your life. What collapses is the false self, the illusion that you were ever supposed to manage the universe. And in its place, what rises is peace. You begin to see that you never had control. You only had choices. And when you stop trying to control everything, you begin to choose from love instead of fear. You begin to act from alignment instead of desperation. You begin to trust that even your missteps are part of the path. Even your detours are sacred. Even your delays are divine. This is freedom, not the freedom to escape life, but the freedom to meet life exactly as it is, with an open heart and an unclenched soul. The freedom to walk forward, not because you know what's coming, but because you no longer need to. The freedom to breathe not because everything is perfect, but because you've stopped trying to make it so. So breathe. Loosen your grip. Let go. Not because you're giving up, but because you're finally waking up. The moment you stop trying to control life is the moment life starts to flow through you effortlessly, gracefully, truthfully. That's not the end of the journey. That's the beginning of real freedom. 19. Your true self emerges when you let the false one fall away. There comes a moment in every seeker's path when striving no longer makes sense. Not because you've reached the top of the mountain, but because you finally realize the mountain was never yours to climb. It was built by someone else. Shaped by the world's voices, by other people's expectations, by a society that praised masks more than authenticity. And so you climbed, you copied, you adapted, you survived. You learned how to be what others needed, wanted, celebrated. You built a self-peace by pieceano from your truth, but from your fear, not from your soul, but from your survival. And one day, that self starts to crack. Maybe it cracks in a moment of deep exhaustion when you finally had enough. Maybe it cracks in silence when you're alone and can no longer outrun the emptiness. Maybe it cracks in grief or heartbreak or sudden stillness. But it cracks, and in that cracking, something ancient inside you whispers, "This isn't who you really are." Buddhism teaches that what we call self is not fixed. It's not some permanent identity carved into stone. It's more like a costumier, temporary construction shaped by memory, thought, habit, and belief. And most of us wear that costume for so long, we forget it isn't our skin. We believe we are our personality. We believe we are our image. We believe we are the story we've repeated so many times it feels like truth. This is who I am. This is who I have to be. But here's the truth. Your real self doesn't need a story. It doesn't need to be defined, defended, or decorated. It simply is. It is presence, awareness, stillness. It is the quiet observer behind every thought, the gentle witness behind every emotion, the unchanging space within you that remains untouched by praise or blame, success or failure, gain or loss. It is who you were before the world told you who to be. And it is who you'll return to when the false self finally falls away. But this return isn't easy, because you've spent years building the false self. It's familiar, it's comfortable, it gives you a sense of control, and dismantling it feels like death. Because in many ways it is. It's the death of ego, the death of pretense, the death of needing to impress, to win, to be seen, to always be something. And yet, that death is your liberation. You don't need to fight the false self. You don't need to attack it. You simply need to see it. To recognize when you're performing instead of being, when you're reacting instead of responding, when you're chasing validation instead of living in truth. And with that awareness, you begin to let go. One belief at a time, one role at a time, one old identity at a time. You let go of the need to be the strong one. You let go of the pressure to always be improving. You let go of the fear that if you stop trying, you'll disappear. You let go of everything that isn't real, and in that letting go, something stunning begins to happen. Your true self rises. Not dramatically, not loudly, but quietly, steadily, unshakably. You begin to speak from truth, not from fear. You begin to feel peace, not because life is easy, but because you are no longer at war with who you are. You begin to feel love not just for others, but for yourself, in your rawest form. You begin to act not to prove anything, but because your actions are aligned with your heart. This kind of authenticity can't be faked. It can't be practiced. It can only be revealed, and the only way it reveals itself is when the noise dies down, when the masks come off, when the roles collapse. That's why Buddhist monks spend so much time in silence. Not to escape the world, but to peel away the layers of illusion, to remember that the deepest truth is not something you can say, it's something you become. In meditation, the thoughts will come. I should be better. I need to fix this. I can't let people see the real me. But the deeper you go, the more those thoughts dissolve. And what's left is you, not the curated you, not the social you, the aware you, the compassionate you, the peaceful, formless, timeless you that is not based on comparison or competition, but on stillness, clarity, and unconditional presence. This is not about becoming someone new. It's about removing everything that isn't you. It's about shedding the expectations, the shame, the shoulds. It's about letting go of the narrative you inherited and choosing your own way of being. And yes, this process will feel like loss at first. loss of identity, loss of relationships that were built around your mask, loss of approval. But in time, you'll see it for what it is, not loss, but lightening, not collapse, but clarity, not erasure, but emergence. Because the more false things you let go of, the more room you make for what's true. You don't need to add anything to yourself. You need to subtract. You don't need to become special. You need to become real. You don't need to perform worthiness. You need to remember that your existence is already proof of it. So take a breath, close your eyes, and ask, what have I been pretending to be that I no longer want to carry? And then let it fall, let it crumble, let it dissolve in the silence. Because what will remain is something far more beautiful than any identity you've ever built. 20. Peace is found the moment you stop chasing and start being. There is a chase you've been running your whole life. You might not call it that. You might call it ambition, self-improvement, healing, even enlightenment. But underneath it all, it's a chasey, constant motion towards something that you believe will finally bring peace. A version of yourself you haven't become yet. A life you haven't built yet. A problem you haven't solved yet. A silence you haven't earned yet. You tell yourself, once I achieve this, I'll finally rest. Once I become that, I'll finally love myself. Once I fix everything inside me, then I'll finally feel peace. But the moment you reach one goal, your mind creates the next. And again, you chase. You chase the right words, the right mood, the right moment to begin healing. You chase approval from people who don't even understand your journey. You chase stillness, ironically, through movement. You chase wholeness by trying to gather more pieces. But Buddhism gently, powerfully, and consistently reminds us, you are not incomplete because you lack something. You are incomplete because you are not present. You are already whole, but you are not with yourself. You are out there scattered in 100 desires, comparisons, identities, and imagined futures. And the farther you chase, the more distant you become from the only place where peace is ever possible. Now, let this sink in not as a poetic line, but as a truth that can save you years of struggle. Peace does not arrive after the chase ends. Peace is what remains when the chase ends. That means peace is not a prize. It's not a reward for being good enough. It's not a level you unlock. It's your natural state, but you've buried it beneath layers of seeking. Just like water settles when left undisturbed, your soul returns to peace when you stop stirring it with constant striving. You were taught to chase, not by evil intention, but by unconscious systems. From the time you were young, you were conditioned to equate stillness with laziness, contentment with failure. To sit quietly and breathe was seen as doing nothing, so you learned to rush, to perform, to produce, and eventually you internalized the belief that peace is earned by exhausting yourself. But it's not. Peace is accessed the moment you become still enough to notice it was always here. Buddhist practice isn't about adding more effort to your life. It's about removing the effort that hides your true nature. When you sit in meditation, the goal is not to chase enlightenment. The goal is to stop running physically, mentally, spiritually, and let what is be. To feel your breath, not to control it, but to be with it. To notice your thoughts, not to fix them, but to observe them. To watch the present moment unfold, not as a means to an end, but as the end itself. And in that surrender, something opens. A doorway, a silence, a presence. You begin to feel the peace that was never gonenly drowned in the noise of your mental chase. You realize that the happiness you've been seeking wasn't in the next chapter. It was in the space between thoughts, the pause between actions, the breath you never noticed. You do not need to be better to feel peace. You do not need to be healed, fixed, upgraded, enlightened. You need to stop just for a moment and allow yourself to be. Just be. No role, no mask, no outcome, just presence. But here's the hard part. The mind will resist this, because your mind is addicted to motion, to proving, to becoming. It will whisper, "You're wasting time. This isn't productive. You could be doing more." But doing more is what took you further away from peace in the first place. Let the mind panic. Let it twitch. Let it writhe in the discomfort of stillness. Eventually, it will quiet because the truth is louder in silence. And that truth is this: you are already enough. You don't need a better job, a better body, a better past, a better future. You don't need more money, more followers, more wisdom, more words. You just need to return to the breath, to your body, to this moment, because this moment is not in the way of peace. It is peace if you stop trying to turn it into something else. This doesn't mean you won't grow. You will. But growth without the need to chase becomes graceful, not forceful. It means you move from a sense of wholeness, not from lack. It means you create not to be worthy, but because you are worthy. You love not to be loved, but because love flows through you when you're no longer blocking it with fear. In this space of non-chasing, life becomes lighter. You no longer panic when people leave. You no longer cling to identities. You no longer grasp at the future. You become soft, aware, and rooted. And the world begins to reflect that. You'll notice beauty in ordinary things. You'll feel gratitude without needing a reason. You'll rest deeply not because the work is done, but because you've stopped trying to outrun your life. This is not giving up. This is waking up. Waking up from the illusion that peace is somewhere else, that life is better over there, that healing is always in the next course, the next practice, the next stage. Waking up to the truth that peace is now. It always has been, and it always will be. So breathe. Feel the chair beneath you, the air around you, the life within you. Don't move. Don't fix. Don't chase. Just be here. Because in this very moment, without changing anything, you are enough. And peace is already yours. 21. The journey was always inward, not forward. You were taught to move forward, to set goals, to build steps, to keep going. Progress, they said, is in the direction of more success, more growth, more discipline, more results. And so you ran, not because you were broken, but because you believed healing lived somewhere up ahead. And with every new chapter of life, you ran harder. Through pain, you ran. Through heartbreak, you ran. Through silence, fear, ambition, and even spiritual practice, you kept running forward. But you never stopped to ask, what if the path I'm on is running away from the very thing I'm trying to find? Buddhism doesn't give you a map to somewhere else. It hands you a mirror, and it says, stop looking, start seeing. Because the truth is this: the destination you've been chasing was never ahead of you. It was within you, buried under years of proving, pushing, pretending, surviving. You thought freedom was at the finish line. But freedom is what begins when the race ends. You thought peace was what you earned after fixing yourself. But peace is what you uncover when you stop believing you're broken. You thought love was something to win. But love is what you remember when you stop abandoning yourself. Every teaching, every breath, every silent moment of stillness has been trying to whisper this one truth: you are already home. But you can't see it when your mind is projecting, performing, defending, comparing. You can't feel it when your heart is still carrying old stories, old shame, old voices that tell you you're not there yet. The world may tell you to keep going, but the path of awakening asks you to turn around, not to go backward, but to go inward. And that inward journey is not easy, because inside, you'll meet everything you've spent your life avoiding. The grief you buried, the questions you silenced, the truth you feared, the vulnerability you masked with strength, the inner child who still believes they must earn love by becoming someone else. And here's the paradox. When you finally have the courage to face those parts of yourself, not as enemies, but as forgotten family, you stop running. You begin to sit, to listen, to breathe, to feel. You stop asking the world to validate your existence. You stop outsourcing your worth to followers, numbers, outcomes, relationships. You stop looking for salvation in the next version of you. And you realize something that breaks you open in the most beautiful way. You were always the one you were waiting for. You didn't need a better life. You needed a better relationship with yourself. You didn't need more answers. You needed to stop being afraid of your own questions. You didn't need to become someone else. You needed to unbecome everything the world told you to be. And in that sacred undoing, your real life begins. You wake up not to a new day, but to this day. Not to a new body, but to the miracle of breath. Not to a new identity, but to the spaciousness of being no one and everyone at once. You look in the mirror, not searching for flaws, but recognizing a soul who has survived so much and is still soft. You walk slowly, not because you're behind, but because you're finally present. You sit in silence, not because there's nothing to say, but because you no longer need noise to prove your place in the world. And something shifts. You begin to measure your life not by how far you've gone, but by how fully you've arrived. How honestly you speak. How deeply you listen. How courageously you feel. How gently you forgive. How sincerely you love starting with yourself. You realize that spirituality was never about floating above life. It was about sinking into it fully, messily, beautifully. It was never about escaping the world. It was about waking up within it, to the pain, to the joy, to the mundane, to the miracle. This is what it means to live from presence. Not to be perfect, but to be real. Not to know everything, but to trust something deeper than thought, your awareness, your intuition, your essence. Not to get somewhere, but to be somewhere here. The inward path doesn't give you more. It teaches you how to need less. It doesn't show you how to rise above others. It humbles you into seeing your oneness with all things. It doesn't promise comfort. It offers you something better, truth. And in truth, you find the deepest peace of all, the peace of finally belonging to yourself. So if your soul is tired of chasing, if your mind is exhausted from planning, fixing, achieving, if your heart is quietly whispering that maybe, just maybe, there's nothing to become, then this is your invitation to stop, to sit, to breathe, to turn inward, to touch the silence behind the noise, to feel the space beneath your thoughts, to meet the part of you that was never lostly unheard. Because in that sacred space, there is no race, there is no lack, there is no mask. There is only this moment, this breath, this you, and that is enough. That has always been enough. Because the journey was never about finding yourself somewhere else. It was about returning to what you've always been. Whole. Here. Now. 22. When you master the mind, the world no longer masters you. From the moment you open your eyes in the morning, the mind begins to speak. Before you even take your first conscious breath, the thoughts begin. What time is it? What did I forget yesterday? What will go wrong today? What if I fail again? And most of the time, you don't even notice that this voice is speaking. You simply listen, obey, react. You follow it like a servant follows a king. You let it decide your mood, your fears, your decisions, your worth. And by midday, you feel exhausted not from the world itself, but from how your mind has interpreted it. This is the quiet truth of suffering. It's not what happens around you that breaks you, it's how the mind responds. Buddhism calls this the first arrow and the second arrow. The first arrow is what life does to you. The second arrow is what your mind does to you about what life did to you. You lose a job, that's the first arrow. Painful, yes. But the second arrow is where the real suffering begins. I'm such a failure. I'll never succeed. No one respects me. You get rejected. That's the first arrow. But then your mind fires the second. They never cared about me. I'm not lovable. I shouldn't have even tried. That second arrow is optional, but most people don't even know they're holding the bow. That's why mastering the mind is not about forcing it to be quiet. It's about waking up to the fact that you are not the voice. You are the witness. You are not the storm. You are the sky that holds the storm. And until you realize this, the world will keep pulling your strings through fear, through desire, through doubt. Because when your mind is not trained, everything controls it. Your past, your social media, your insecurities, your impulses, the opinions of people who don't even know your soul. And that is why the Buddha said, "All that we are is the result of what we have thought." He did not say what happens to us. He said what we think. Because the mind is not just a mirror of reality, it is a lens. And if the lens is dirty, distorted, reactive, untrained, then nothing you see will feel right. Even peace will feel like danger. Even silence will feel like discomfort. Even love will feel suspicious because the lens is corrupted. And the only way to clean the lens is through awareness. Awareness is the beginning of mastery. It is the moment you stop being dragged by the mind and start watching it. You begin to ask, why did I react like that? What wound did that person touch? What belief just got triggered? And slowly, you begin to see the mind not as your identity, but as a tool that, when left unattended, turns into a weapon, but when trained with discipline and love, becomes your greatest ally. You stop letting every passing emotion define your reality. You stop letting fear write your story. You stop needing the external world to be perfect in order for you to feel calm. Because now, you carry calm within you, not as a feeling, but as a foundation. And this is where the real shift begins. The world doesn't stop being chaotic, but it stops owning your peace. People don't stop being unpredictable, but they stop owning your worth. Your past doesn't disappear, but it stops deciding your present. You become grounded, not in ego, not in power, but in clarity, in poise, in an inner stillness that can no longer be shaken by the waves, because you've finally become the ocean. This is what it means to master the mind, not to suppress your feelings, but to stop being enslaved by them, not to avoid pain, but to stop turning it into suffering, not to be emotionless, but to be unmoved by unnecessary noise. Buddhist monks spend years in silence, not to escape the world, but to study the mind without distraction, because once you understand your own mind, you understand everyone else's. You stop taking things personally. You stop needing to win arguments. You stop chasing people who can't see you because you see yourself clearly. And now you live differently. You no longer speak just to be heard. You speak to connect. You no longer act out of fear. You act from intention. You no longer wake up reacting. You wake up choosing how to think, how to feel, how to be. And with every choice, your mind gets stronger, not louder, but clearer, not faster, but wiser. And in that clarity, you gain something that even money cannot buy. Freedom. Freedom from overthinking. Freedom from chasing. Freedom from begging the world to validate your existence. You walk into rooms and no longer wonder if you belong because your mind no longer needs permission to exist. You rest at night without spiraling through 1,000 what-ifs because your mind knows when to let go. You meet chaos, not with panic, but with presence, because your mind has been taught to return to stillness like a warrior returns to silence after battle. This is not theory, this is liberation, and it begins with awareness. It continues with discipline, and it ends with peace. You are not too weak. You are not too far gone. You are not too broken to master your mind. The only thing that's ever been in the way is the belief that you are your thoughts. But you are not. You are the space that watches them. You are the silence between them. You are the one who chooses which ones deserve your energy and which ones are just noise in the wind. And when you finally step into that role, not as the prisoner of the mind, but as its master, you will see the world doesn't change, but your experience of it becomes unshakable. Let me know when you're ready for lesson 22, or if you'd like a full series conclusion to beautifully close the full 21-lesson journey. 23. The still mind sees everything clearly. There is a moment in every journey when words no longer help, when action feels forced, when even thinking becomes noise. It's in that moment when you drop the search, when you stop fighting the current, when you stop needing answers, that you begin to understand the deepest teaching of all, that truth, clarity, and peace do not arise through effort. They arise through stillness. Most people don't live in the world. They live in their thoughts about the world. They do not see reality. They see a version of it filtered through fear, desire, judgment, and memory. They are not responding to life, they are reacting to projections. And that's why they suffer. Not because life is cruel, but because their minds are too loud to hear the truth beneath the surface. A busy mind does not see. It interprets, it imagines, it analyzes, but it does not see. And if you cannot see clearly, how can you live clearly? Buddhism teaches that the mind is like water. When it is still, it reflects reality like a mirror. But when it is disturbed, when it is stirred by desire, anger, distraction, or fear, it becomes cloudy. The more you try to fix it in that state, the worse it gets, just like trying to clear muddy water with your hands. The only way to see clearly is to let it settle, to become still. But stillness does not come through force. You cannot yell your way into peace. You cannot rush your way into silence. Stillness is not created, it is revealed when everything that is not essential falls away. And what's not essential? The story, the ego, the noise, the need to control, to impress, to win, to explain, to be someone. Stillness is what remains when you stop trying to be more than what you already are. When your mind becomes still, your problems don't disappear, but your perception of them changes. You stop exaggerating the pain. You stop dramatizing the future. You stop creating suffering from what is simply a passing challenge. You begin to see things as they are, not as you fear they might become. That relationship that used to feel like rejection, you see the lesson in it. That failure that haunted you for years, you see how it made room for what's unfolding now. That anxiety that ruled your mornings, you begin to see it as a visitor, not a master. Stillness is not emptiness, it is spaciousness. It is awareness so vast that thoughts can move through it without sticking. It is the silence that allows you to finally hear your own heart. And when you can hear your heart, you begin to make decisions that align with your soul, not with your wounds. You stop reacting from habit and start responding from truth. Most people live their entire lives like someone walking through a fogged mirror, confused, reactive, never sure what's real. But when the mind is still, the fog clears. You begin to understand people play not just their words, but their energy. You see their pain behind their anger. You see their fear behind their cruelty. And because you are no longer reacting blindly, you begin to respond with wisdom, compassion, and strength. Stillness is not a luxury for monks. It is not an escape. It is not a privilege. It is a necessity for anyone who wants to live consciously in a chaotic world. You do not need to go to a mountain. You do not need to live in a temple. You simply need to pause, to create space between stimulus and response, to breathe, to let thoughts pass without grabbing onto them, to allow the mind to rest from its constant commentary. Because when you stop talking to yourself all day long, something sacred happens. The present moment speaks back. You begin to hear the birds, not as background noise, but as presence. You feel the warmth of sunlight on your skin, not as a passing detail, but as a blessing. You watch your breath move in and out, and you remember that life itself is already enough. In that stillness, decisions become easier, not because you have all the information, but because you are no longer making choices from panic. Emotions become teachers, not enemies, because you are no longer afraid to feel. Relationships become lighter not because others changed, but because you no longer demand that they complete you. And your path becomes clearer not because the future is known, but because you are no longer clouding the moment with fear. Stillness allows you to meet life as it is, not with resistance, but with reverence. You stop needing every day to be perfect. You stop needing others to act a certain way. You stop needing the past to change or the future to arrive. You realize, this moment is the only thing that's ever been real. The still mind does not get rid of thoughts, it simply stops becoming them. It watches anger rise and fall like a wave. It notices fear without feeding it. It allows doubt to exist without bowing to it. The still mind is not cold. It is open. It is receptive. It is humble. It is aware that it does not need to have the answer, because truth reveals itself in silence. And the most beautiful truth of all, you do not have to earn stillness. You were born with it. Beneath the layers of overthinking, striving, and self-judgment, stillness has always lived inside you. It is the original state of your being. It is what you return to in deep sleep. It is what you feel in moments of awe, of love, of surrender. It is what welcomes you every time you finally stop chasing, stop proving, stop running. Stillness does not mean never acting. It means acting from a place of clarity. It means moving without rushing, speaking without forcing, living without grasping. It means doing what needs to be done, not from fear, but from wisdom, from alignment, from grace. So, pause. Right now. Breathe. Let the next thought rise and pass. Let the noise come and go. Don't chase it. Don't fight it. Just watch. And in that watching, feel the sacred space that opens up between you and the thought. That space is freedom. That space is truth. That space is you. You are not the storm. You are the sky. You are not the noise. You are the silence that holds it all. You are not your thoughts. You are the stillness that sees them clearlier, and in that seeing is finally free. 24. Real power begins the moment you stop needing control. You've spent your life trying to hold everything together. You've planned your future down to the finest detail. You've replayed your past over and over again, trying to find what you could have done differently. You tried to predict outcomes, fix people, manage emotions, control situations. And yet, the more you try to control life, the more exhausted you become. The tighter you hold on, the more things slip through your fingers. The more you resist uncertainty, the more chaotic your mind feels. Why? Because control is an illusion, a comforting one, but an illusion nonetheless. Buddhism teaches that suffering begins where attachment and resistance meet. You suffer not because things change, but because you tried to stop them from changing. You suffer not because someone left, but because you believed they were never supposed to. You suffer not because life didn't go according to plan, but because you believed your plan was superior to life itself. But what if you could release that grip? What if you could stop wrestling the river and begin to float? What if the real power you've been seeking doesn't come from controlling life, but from flowing with it? Control is rooted in fear, the fear of the unknown, of pain, of loss, of being vulnerable. When you try to control everything, what you're really saying is, I don't trust life, I don't trust others, I don't trust myself. So you try to micromanage the outcome. You try to make sure nothing unexpected can happen. But life is the unexpected. It's not a script, it's a dance. And every time you cling, you miss the music. To live in control is to live in contraction. You contract your heart so it doesn't break. You contract your voice so you don't say the wrong thing. You contract your dreams so you don't fail. And you shrink, not because the world is small, but because your fear of uncertainty becomes a prison. But there is another way, the way of surrender. Not surrender as in defeat. Surrender as in trust. Trust in life. Trust in yourself. Trust that even when things fall apart, they are falling into place. Trust that you do not need to micromanage the unfolding of the universe. Trust that your deepest strength is revealed, not when you're in control, but when you remain centered even as control slips away. Think about nature. The ocean does not need to control the tides. The sun does not need to force its light. A tree does not panic when the seasons change. It sheds what no longer serves. It bends with the wind. It blossoms when it's time. There is no panic, no force, only flow. And yet, humans, the most intelligent species, spend most of their time fighting that flow. You try to fix what isn't broken. You try to hold on to what wants to leave. You try to force open doors that were never meant for you. Why? Because the ego is terrified of surrender. It wants to know everything, predict everything, secure everything. But here's the brutal truth. You can have all the information, all the plans, all the backup strategies, and life will still humble you. Because control is not safety, it's a trap. And the moment you realize this, not just in theory, but in your bones, you begin to experience real power. The power to stay calm in the unknown. The power to listen instead of react. The power to let go of what's pulling you down. The power to walk away without bitterness. The power to sit in silence and trust that the next right step will rise when it's time. This is not weakness. This is mastery. When you stop needing to control, you gain something far more valuable: clarity. Because your judgment is no longer clouded by fear. You no longer make decisions from desperation. You no longer hold on to people who are clearly meant to leave. You begin to recognize that not everything requires your grip, some things just need your presence. The Buddhist path is filled with stories of monks who gave up wealth, status, attachments, not because they were failures, but because they were free. They understood that letting go is not loss. It is expansion. It is the reclaiming of your energy from everything that no longer deserves it. And when you let go of control, you begin to move from alignment, not anxiety. You stop pushing the river and start flowing with it. You stop fighting reality and start responding to it. You stop needing guarantees and start trusting in your ability to handle whatever comes. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop clinging. It doesn't mean you don't act. It means you act without attachment to the result. It doesn't mean you float through life passively. It means you move with life consciously, gracefully, with open hands instead of clenched fists. And that shift changes everything. Your relationships become softer because you no longer need to control how others feel about you. Your goals become lighter because you no longer define your worth by whether they succeed. Your identity becomes looser because you no longer need to hold on to roles that no longer reflect your soul. You begin to taste freedom, not because everything is perfect, but because your peace is no longer conditional. You wake up without tension in your chest. You fall asleep without carrying the weight of tomorrow. You walk into uncertainty without needing to pretend you're fearless, because now you understand true courage is walking forward even with fear. This is the paradox of power. The less you need control, the more powerful you become. Because control limits you to what you already know, but surrender opens you to what you could never have imagined. And what's waiting for you beyond your illusion of control is not chaos, it's a deeper rhythm, a quiet intelligence, a divine unfolding that doesn't need your interference, only your trust. So breathe. Unclench your hands. Let go of what's fighting you. Stop trying to manage the wind and become the sail. Let life carry you. Because when you finally stop trying to control the waves, you discover that peace was never about fixing the ocean. It was about learning to float. And that's when you become truly free. 25. Detach from outcome, connect with presence. You wake up each morning with an invisible weight pressing on your chest, not from the day ahead, but from everything you expect it to become. You're not just living, you're calculating, measuring, forecasting. What will happen if this works? What if it doesn't? What will they think? What if I lose everything I worked so hard for? You sit with someone you love, and you're already afraid of losing them. You start a new chapter, and you're already afraid of failure. You set a goal, and the joy of the process disappears, hijacked by your obsession with the result. This is the subtle poison of attachment to outcome. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It wraps itself around your ambition, your hope, even your love, and turns them into anxiety. Buddhism teaches that desire itself isn't the problem. The problem begins when desire transforms into attachment. Attachment to what must happen. Attachment to how it must unfold. Attachment to when it must arrive. And most dangerously, attachment to what you believe your worth depends on. You tell yourself, if I don't get this result, I'm not good enough. If this relationship fails, I'm unlovable. If I'm not constantly achieving, I'm falling behind. These are the invisible contracts you make with life, where you trade your peace in the present for a sense of security in the future. But the irony is, the future is never guaranteed. And every time you bind your worth to what hasn't even happened yet, you imprison yourself inside a loop of fear. To detach from outcome doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you shift your allegiance from results to presence, from fear to flow, from needing something to happen to being fully alive in what is. It means you no longer let your happiness hang on a string that stretches into tomorrow. It means you plant the seed, but you release the need to force the harvest. You show up fully, courageously, humbly, and then you let go of the part that's never been in your hands anyway. Think of an artist. The moment they become obsessed with how the world will receive their painting, the canvas stiffens, the brush hesitates, the creation loses its soul. But when they forget about the audience, the result, the approval, something magical happens. They disappear into the moment. The ego steps back, presence steps in, and what emerges is truth raw, alive, sacred. The same applies to life. When you detach from how things should turn out, you begin to experience them as they are. And only in that raw space of presence can your true self emerge. The reason attachment to outcome creates suffering is simple. You are trying to control something you were never meant to. You can control your effort, your intention, your energy, but not the exact result. Not how people will respond, not how life will unfold. And every time you forget this, you fight reality. And reality always wins. The weather changes, people walk away, plans collapse, life shifts. And if your peace is tied to how perfectly things must go, your peace will always be fragile. But when you learn to connect with presence, you discover a different kind of strength. Not the strength of force, but the strength of trust. Not the confidence that everything will go your way, but the inner knowing that you'll be okay even if it doesn't, because presence gives you access to something outcome never can your own soul. The part of you that is untouched by success or failure. The part of you that is steady, quiet, and whole. Presence is where life actually happens. It's the only place where love is real, where healing begins, where wisdom lives. And yet, most people spend their lives leaning away from it, chasing a moment that hasn't come yet, or reliving one that's already gone. They never arrive. Even in joy, they worry about when it will end. Even in peace, they wonder what comes next. Even in success, they fear losing it. Because they are not rooted in being, they are floating in expectation. To detach from outcome is to come home, home to your breath, your body, your awareness. It is to sit down inside this moment and finally rest, not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer demanding that it be. It is to open your hands and say, I give my best and I release the rest. Not out of laziness, but out of deep trust in the intelligence of life. Trust that what is meant for you cannot miss you. Trust that what leaves was never yours to hold. Trust that even your detours are divine. And what happens when you live this way? You stop rushing. You stop performing. You stop trying to convince the world of your worth. You stop needing applause to feel seen. You stop attaching your identity to what you produce. You begin to walk differently, slower, lighter, with your heart open instead of armored. You begin to speak differently, less to impress, more to express. You begin to love differently, freely, without needing to possess or control. Because you realize, you were never here to control the story. You were here to show up inside it awake, honest, and fully present. This shift is not easy. Your mind will resist it. Your ego will panic. The part of you that finds safety and certainty will scream for a plan, a result, a guarantee. But stay with the discomfort. Breathe through the urge to grasp. Let the moment be enough. And in that surrender, you will feel something deeper than certainty, peace. The peace of no longer needing life to obey your timeline. The peace of trusting the process, even when you don't understand it yet. The peace of being here, not trying to get somewhere else, not waiting for it to be better, not calculating your next move, just being here. And the truth is, that's all you ever needed. Because the outcome is just a shadow. The presence is the light. And when you learn to live in the light in full presence, full acceptance, full surrender, everything changes. Not because the world becomes perfect, but because you finally stop needing it to be. You are no longer a beggar of the future. You are no longer a prisoner of expectation. You are free not because you have everything, but because you are fully with this. And that is power. That is peace. That is real life. 26. Healing begins the moment you stop running from yourself. You've spent years trying to fix what's broken, years trying to outrun the shadows that follow you into every new chapter. No matter how far you move, how much you accomplish, how perfectly you play the role others expect of you, there's always something unresolved pulling at you from within. The pain you hide, the fear you disguise as strength, the shame that lingers, whispering that you're not enough. You laugh, you post, you move forward, but inside, a part of you is always running. Running from the memories you never made peace with. Running from the emotions you were taught to suppress. Running from the silence that makes you feel everything too deeply. Running from the version of yourself you've been too afraid to meet. But here is the truth. You cannot outrun yourself. No matter how fast you go, no matter how much you distract, avoid, succeed, numb, or perform, your unhealed pain will follow. It doesn't live in the past. It lives in your nervous system, in your thoughts, in your habits, in your relationships, in your reactions, and the longer you run, the deeper it hides. The more invisible it becomes, but not any less powerful, because unhealed wounds don't disappear. They just start making decisions for you. You start pushing people away not because you don't want love, but because you're terrified of being seen. You start chasing validation not because you're arrogant, but because you're still looking for proof that you matter. You start needing everything to be perfect, not because you enjoy control, but because you're scared of collapsing if even one thing goes wrong. You begin to wear masks so well, even you forget who's underneath. Buddhism doesn't offer escape, it offers presence. It says, sit, be still, feel. It invites you to stop running, not because you're weak, but because you're finally strong enough to face what you couldn't before. Healing doesn't happen when you force yourself to be better. It begins when you create the courage to sit in your truth without flinching. To say, this is my pain, this is my story, this is my fear, and I will not abandon myself anymore. Because that's what the running really is, self-abandonment. Every time you ignore your pain, you're telling yourself, you don't deserve to be heard. Every time you distract yourself instead of feeling, you're saying, you're too much. Every time you numb your emotions, you reinforce the message, you're not worth the time it takes to heal. And your inner child, the part of you still holding that first heartbreak, that first rejection, that first betrayal, begins to believe it. But healing is not about erasing the pain. It's about tending to it. It's about finally turning inward and saying, I see you, I'm here, and I'm not leaving. It's about sitting with the parts of you that are trembling, and instead of silencing them, asking, what do you need? It's about offering yourself the gentleness you were never given, the forgiveness you've never been taught to extend, the space to grieve not just the loss of others, but the loss of all the versions of yourself that never felt safe enough to exist. You begin to understand that the path to healing is not linear. Some days you will feel free, other days the weight will return. Some wounds will take years to untangle. Some beliefs will die hard. But that doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're feeling. It means you're finally present enough to do the work that matters. The quiet work, the invisible work, the sacred work of reuniting with yourself. In the process, you stop trying to be impressive. You start trying to be honest. You stop trying to be strong in the way the world demands. You start discovering a new kind of strength, the kind that cries, that breathes through pain, that shows up even when it hurts, that doesn't pretend to be unbreakable, but chooses to be whole anyway. And the more you choose yourself, your real self, the one behind all the masks, the more you start to feel peace. Not because everything is perfect, but because you're no longer fighting the truth. You're no longer denying your needs. You're no longer begging the world to give you what you've been withholding from yourself: compassion, attention, worth, love. Slowly, your relationship with life begins to shift. You stop asking, how do I get rid of this feeling? And start asking, what is this feeling trying to teach me? You stop reacting from old wounds and start responding with new wisdom. You stop being afraid of your past because you realize it no longer owns you, not because it disappeared, but because you're no longer afraid to face it. And this is the turning point. When the running stops, when the silence is no longer terrifying, when the stillness becomes a sanctuary instead of a threat, you learn to sit with yourself in the dark, to hold your own hand, to breathe with your fear instead of pushing it away, to meet your grief with tenderness, to cradle your anxiety like a child, to look in the mirror and not see someone broken, but someone becoming whole. This is the real healing. Not a miracle, not a single moment, but a return to the parts of you that have been waiting to be loved, not fixed, not judged, not avoided, but simply seen. So stop running. Stop waiting for someone to come save you. Stop measuring your healing by how happy you look. Sit down with your pain. Sit down with your truth. Sit down with your own beating heart and listen. Because deep beneath the noise, beneath the trauma, beneath the fear, there is stillness, there is peace, there is you. And that you has never been too broken to heal. 27. True wisdom is remembering what you already know. There comes a time in every seeker's life when you realize that the answers you've been desperately searching for in books, in teachers, in philosophies, in the endless scrolling through other people's voices, have always lived within you. That the guidance you've begged for, the peace you've longed for, the clarity you thought was missing, was never missing at all. It was just drowned beneath the noise, forgotten under layers of fear, buried in the dust of what the world told you to be. You've spent years accumulating more knowledge, more strategies, more ideas. You've listened to podcasts, read scriptures, followed teachings, tried rituals, and chased signs from the universe. And still, you feel a hollow echo. Not because the teachings are wrong, but because you believed the wisdom was out there, rather than in here. But Buddhism teaches something that shakes you to your core. You are not here to collect truth. You are here to remember it. Because the deepest truths, the ones that matter, are not learned. They are recognized. They feel like a whisper you've heard before, a knowing that lives in your bones. A silence that makes more sense than 1,000 words. You know how to let go. You've just been taught to hold on. You know how to breathe through pain, but you were told to numb it. You know how to be still, but you were taught to hustle endlessly. You know how to love without attachment, but you were conditioned to cling. You know how to be at peace, but the world taught you chaos and called it ambition. This is the great forgetting, the slow erosion of your inner knowing, replaced by layers of noise, of should, of pressure and performance. And it's why so many people feel lost, not because they're far from the truth, but because they've been trained to ignore the compass that was built into their soul. So what does it mean to remember? It means to unlearn the false stories, to gently peel away the lies that told you you're not enough unless you become something more, to sit in stillness and listen not for a voice from the clouds, but for the quiet whisper in your heart that says, "This is you. This has always been you." It means noticing that the answers rise not in noise, but in silence, not in movement, but in stillness, not in striving, but in surrender. Because wisdom isn't loud. It doesn't argue. It doesn't demand your attention. It waits patiently behind your distractions, behind your anxiety, behind your obsession with getting it right. It waits for you to stop, to breathe, to listen. And when you finally sit down, not to figure it all out, but simply to be, that's when wisdom returns. Like a lost friend, like sunlight through a window you didn't realize you had opened. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. It simply reminds you of what you already knew before the world told you to forget. And what do you remember? That your worth is not negotiable, that your breath is sacred, that this moment, this ordinary quiet moment, is everything, that you do not need to become more to be whole, that everything you seek, peace, love, belonging, clarity, is already within you, waiting for you to stop searching long enough to feel it. You begin to realize that you were never meant to become someone else. You were meant to return to yourself. And from that space, everything changes. You speak with more honesty, not because you've mastered communication, but because you've stopped performing. You make choices with more clarity, not because life is easier, but because you're no longer betraying your intuition. You love with more freedom, not because you've read about boundaries, but because you no longer confuse attachment with connection. You begin to trust yourself again, not because you've become perfect, but because you've reconnected with the truth that your spirit has always known. And slowly, the fear begins to dissolve. The fear of making the wrong move. The fear of being unworthy. The fear of losing control. Because wisdom reminds you, you were never here to control the river. You were here to flow with it. You were never here to be perfect. You were here to be present. You were never here to collect answers. You were here to remember the stillness beneath the noise. This remembering isn't an intellectual exercise. It is a homecoming. It is a return to the unshakable awareness that you are already held, that life is not against you, that your pain has meaning, that your path is sacred even when it's messy, even when it's unclear, even when it doesn't look the way you thought it would. And perhaps the greatest remembering of all, you are not separate, not from truth, not from love, not from the divine. You are not a lost soul looking for connection. You are connection. You are the silence between the words. You are the presence behind the thoughts. You are the very wisdom you were seeking. You just forgot. But now in this breath, in this moment, you remember. And with that remembrance comes a peace that cannot be shaken. A peace that doesn't depend on certainty. A peace that doesn't need proof. A peace that doesn't ask for applause. A peace that simply is because you have returned to yourself. You are no longer chasing light. You are realizing you are light. You are no longer begging for answers. You are learning to trust your questions. You are no longer trying to become wise. You are remembering that wisdom has always been within you. Quiet, still, undeniable, waiting for you to come home. 28. Peace isn't found, it's built, breath by breath. You've been told your whole life to go search for peace, that it's somewhere out there, in a better job, a calmer relationship, a different city, a more perfect version of yourself. You've been taught that peace is a destination, something you reach when everything finally lines up, when the noise dies down, when the storms are over, when your past no longer stings and your future looks clear. So you keep searching, wandering through experiences, chasing goals, fixing people, trying to organize life like a puzzle, thinking that if you just put the last piece in the right place, you'll finally breathe, finally rest, finally feel safe. But Buddhism teaches something radically different. Peace is not something you find by escaping life. It's something you create by embracing it fully. It's not waiting for you on the other side of success or certainty. It's not hiding behind your next achievement or deeper spiritual knowledge. It is right here, in this very breath, this very moment. Not because it's easy, but because you've decided to stop running and build it. Peace is not a reward. It's a practice. You build it when you sit down with your thoughts and don't flinch. You build it when you breathe deeply through your discomfort instead of pushing it away. You build it when you stop responding with anger just because you've been provoked. You build it when you pause before reacting and choose presence instead of panic. You build peace the moment you stop trying to control the outside world and start regulating the inner one. Because real peace is not about avoiding chaos, it's about learning how to remain calm within it. That's what makes it sacred. That's what makes it powerful. That's what turns it into your greatest strength. Not because the world becomes quiet, but because you do. You begin to understand that peace is not a luxury for the lucky. It is a discipline, a choice, a construction. And it doesn't come from wishing, it comes from doing the work of letting go, the work of forgiving, the work of being honest with yourself, the work of sitting in silence long enough to hear your own heart again. There is no shortcut to this kind of peace. It doesn't arrive in one meditation. It doesn't appear after one retreat. It doesn't magically descend because you want it badly enough. It comes when you build it, breath by breath, choice by choice, moment by moment. When you catch yourself spiraling into old fears, and instead of reacting, you observe. That's peace being built. When your past comes knocking with pain, and instead of avoiding it, you welcome it like an old friend. That's peace being built. When someone triggers your deepest wound and you respond with grace, not because it's easy, but because you've trained your nervous system to breathe, that's peace being built. The world will always be loud. People will always misunderstand you. Life will never be fully under your control. But peace is the inner environment you create when you stop expecting outer conditions to give you permission to relax. And what happens when you build this kind of peace? You begin to move differently. You don't rush anymore, because you're no longer racing toward a future to escape the present. You don't chase people, because you know nothing healthy ever comes from desperation. You don't argue just to prove your point, because you value your energy more than your ego. You don't fear silence, because it's become your sanctuary, not your punishment. You begin to see how much of your suffering came not from the events of life, but from your resistance to them. Buddhism doesn't ask you to be passive. It asks you to be present, to respond consciously, to show up completely, to choose peace even when it's the harder option. Because that's what separates real peace from avoidance. Avoidance says, let me not feel anything. Peace says, let me feel it fully, but not be destroyed by it. Avoidance numbs. Peace liberates. And once you build that kind of peace, no one can take it from you. Not a breakup, not a failure, not even grief, because it's not built on circumstances. It's built on clarity, on trust, on the unshakable inner knowing that no matter what happens, you are still here, still breathing, still capable of meeting this moment with dignity. So how do you begin building peace? Not by fixing everything, but by doing the opposite, by stopping the chase, stopping the noise, stopping the endless comparison, stopping the war you've waged against yourself in the name of progress, and starting something new. Start with the breath. One conscious breath in, one conscious breath out. This is your foundation. This is your home. This is your sacred tool. You don't need all the answers right now. You don't need a 5-year plan. You don't need to prove yourself. You just need to come back to this breath, this moment, and from there, build. Every time you choose stillness over reaction, peace is built. Every time you choose to walk away instead of argue, peace is built. Every time you hold space for someone's pain without making it about you, peace is built. Every time you forgive yourself for being human, peace is built. Every time you stop demanding that life be perfect and start meeting it as it is, peace is built. And eventually, that peace becomes who you are, not just what you feel. It walks with you, speaks through you, grounds you when everything else trembles, and the world notices. Not because you're louder, but because you're anchored. You are no longer a storm. You are the I within it. You are no longer lost. You are home within yourself. You are no longer seeking peace. You have become it. 29. The moment you fully accept yourself, the war ends. There is a war that most people never speak about, a silent, invisible war that takes place behind closed doors, behind forced smiles, behind achievements and applause. It's the war you fight within yourself. The war between who you are and who you think you should be. The war between your truth and the mask you wear. The war between your soul and your shame. It is relentless, and it drains more life from you than any enemy outside ever could. You wake up every day and put on armor. You act like you're fine. You work hard. You keep moving. You keep pleasing. You keep apologizing for your emotions, shrinking to make others comfortable, striving to meet some impossible version of perfection that you didn't even choose. And at night when you lie down, the voices get louder. You should have done more. You're not good enough. Why can't you just be better? You fall asleep, not from peace, but from exhaustion. This is the war. And Buddhism teaches the only way to end it is not by changing yourself, but by finally accepting yourself. Radical, unconditional, complete acceptance, not just of your strengths, but of your flaws, not just the light, but the shadows, not just the parts that get praised, but the parts you were taught to hide, the anger, the insecurity, the trauma, the desire, the fear, the grief, the mistakes. Because here's the truth. You cannot heal what you refuse to accept. You cannot be free if you are still at war with your own soul. You cannot become whole if you keep rejecting the parts of you that are hurting. You were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be real. And real means you will be messy. You will be inconsistent. You will outgrow versions of yourself. You will stumble. You will carry scars. But that is not failure. That is being human. And the moment you stop trying to be someone you're not, is the moment peace finally begins to arrive. Self-acceptance is not passivity. It is power. It is saying, I see myself, all of me, and I choose to stop running. It is the courage to look into the mirror and not flinch. To hold your own gaze without judgment. To say, I am not perfect, but I am enough. I am wounded, but I am worthy. I have fallen, but I will rise, and I will rise as I am. Not when I become someone else, not when I achieve more, not when I'm flawless, but now, as I am. Because the longer you wait to accept yourself, the longer you keep peace on pause. You'll keep trying to earn worth through performance. You'll keep seeking love in places that require you to shrink. You'll keep betraying your truth to avoid discomfort. And slowly, your spirit will suffocate beneath the weight of trying to be someone you're not. But when you accept yourself fully, radically, without condition, something miraculous happens. You soften. The tension in your chest loosens. The critic in your mind loses power. You start showing up without pretending. You start speaking without rehearsing. You start breathing deeper because for the first time, you're not trying to be anything but yourself. And from that space, healing begins. Because the body holds every rejection you've ever inflicted on yourself. Every time you looked in the mirror and said, not enough. Every time you punished yourself for being tired. Every time you ignored your needs just to please others. Every time you pushed through pain because you thought resting made you weak. But the body also holds memory of every time you chose kindness, every time you stopped judging, every time you rested, not out of laziness, but as an act of self-love. Every time you spoke gently to yourself, even if it felt awkward at first. These are the bricks of your inner peace. You build it not with perfection, but with acceptance. You begin to trust your own voice. You begin to honor your boundaries. You begin to create without fear of judgment. You begin to live not to impress, but to express. You begin to feel safe in your own skin, not because you fixed everything, but because you stopped needing to. Acceptance does not mean you stop growing. It means you stop growing from self-hatred and start growing from love. It means you no longer say, "I need to change so I can be worthy," but rather, "I am already worthy, and because of that, I choose to grow." That's the shift. That's the freedom. And in that freedom, the war ends. You no longer attack yourself for not being where you thought you'd be. You no longer compare your path to others and call it failure. You no longer force yourself to meet the expectations of people who don't even understand your soul. You stand in your truth, steady, grounded, clear. You walk with dignity, not because the world validates you, but because you validate yourself. And when that happens, others feel it. They feel your peace. They feel your authenticity. They feel your quiet strength, the kind that doesn't need to shout, doesn't need to impress, doesn't need to dominate, because it's rooted in truth. This is the peace the world cannot give you, because it's the peace that comes from finally ending the war inside your own mind. And when you do, life opens. Relationships deepen because you're no longer performing. Creativity blossoms because you're no longer afraid of being seen. Spiritual growth accelerates because you're no longer blocked by shame. And love, real love, begins to flow. Not from desperation, but from overflow, from alignment, from truth. So stop fighting yourself. Stop trying to earn your right to exist. Stop believing the lie that you need to be fixed. You are not broken, you are becoming. And you become most beautifully the moment you choose to stop running and accept all of who you are. Because the moment you fully accept yourself, the war ends and peace begins. 30. You don't need to escape the darkness, you just need to bring in the light. You've been taught that darkness is the enemy, that when things go wrong, when you feel lost, overwhelmed, depressed, anxious, angry, you need to fight it, suppress it, numb it, or escape it as fast as possible. You've been trained to run from discomfort, to fear sadness, to feel shame for feeling low, to panic when you're not okay, as if being human is a mistake, as if the goal of life is to be permanently happy, permanently certain, permanently clear. So you keep chasing light, more success, more goals, more control, more clarity, more approval, anything to keep the darkness away. And still, it finds you. In the silence, in the setbacks, in the heartbreaks, in the late-night questions you don't know how to answer. But Buddhism doesn't tell you to escape the darkness. It doesn't say, run. It says, sit with it. It says, bring awareness, bring presence, bring compassion, bring light. Because darkness is not what hurts you, resistance to it is. The more you fight it, the stronger it grows. The more you deny it, the more power it takes. The more you panic, the more it feeds on your fear. But the moment you stop running, stop avoiding, stop numbing, the moment you breathe and say, I see you, I am not afraid to feel you, the darkness begins to shift. It begins to soften. It begins to teach, because darkness is not just pain, it is the soil of your growth. It holds wisdom, it holds healing, it holds the version of you that can only emerge when you finally sit down inside your own shadows. Think about it. All transformation begins in darkness. Seeds grow in the dark. The womb is dark. Night precedes dawn. Silence births insight. Why should your healing be any different? When life feels dark, it doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you're lost. It means something is trying to grow, trying to surface, trying to be seen. And instead of running, you are being invited to listen, to breathe with your grief instead of suffocating under it, to sit with your shame instead of hiding from it, to feel your rage without destroying yourself or others, to be present with your confusion instead of scrambling for control. This is what bringing light means. It doesn't mean pretending to be okay. It means being real, being raw, being honest. Light is not perfection. It is presence. It is awareness that says, even here, in this darkness, I am still worthy of love. I am still worthy of peace. I am still allowed to exist without apology. When you bring light to your darkness, you stop seeing your emotions as enemies. You stop seeing your struggle as weakness. You stop seeing your flaws as shameful. You start realizing everything you've been running from is simply a part of you that hasn't been held, hasn't been heard, hasn't been healed. And the light you bring, it doesn't come from outside. It's not found in someone's praise. It's not given by circumstances. It's not earned by perfection. It comes from within. It's in your breath when you stop and listen. It's in your awareness when you name what you feel without judgment. It's in your compassion when you speak to yourself the way you would to someone you love. It's in your stillness when you let the moment be what it is, without needing to fix it instantly. And as you do this, moment by moment, a miracle begins to unfold. The darkness no longer scares you. Not because it disappears, but because it no longer defines you. You realize, I am not this thought. I am not this emotion. I am the awareness behind it. I am the space in which it moves. I am the light that sees it without needing to run. And this changes everything. Because now, instead of panicking in your pain, you meet it with gentleness. Instead of shaming yourself for struggling, you offer yourself patience. Instead of hiding from the hard moments, you walk straight into them, not to suffer, but to liberate. You begin to trust that every descent into darkness has meaning, not punishment, but purification, not defeat, but initiation, not the end, but the beginning of your next level of clarity. This is what true spiritual growth looks like. Not constant joy, not perfect peace, but honest presence, especially in the dark. You begin to carry your own candle. You stop waiting for life to be easier and start bringing courage to the difficult parts. You stop waiting for the world to light up your path and start becoming the light yourself. You stop outsourcing your healing and begin showing up for it breath by breath, moment by moment, one sacred pause at a time. And slowly, the darkness begins to transform. Not because you destroyed it, but because you stopped fearing it. Not because you erased it, but because you sat with it long enough to understand it. Not because it got smaller, but because you grew bigger. And now, when the night returns, as it always does, you are no longer afraid. You know how to sit in the dark without losing yourself. You know how to breathe through pain without panicking. You know how to meet your shadows without shame. Because you have become the light. And that light, it cannot be taken. It cannot be broken. It cannot be extinguished by circumstances, by failure, by other people's judgments. Because it was never given by the world, it was remembered by you. So the next time you feel the darkness rising, don't run. Don't hide. Don't numb. Pause. Breathe. Feel. And bring in the light. Because you are not here to escape the darkness. You are here to transform it. And that, right there, is your greatest power. 31. Freedom begins the moment you stop needing to be understood. There is a quiet prison that many people live in, not made of walls, but made of expectations. Not built by others, but by ourselves. It's the need to be understood. The endless effort to explain who you are, why you feel the way you feel, why you've made the choices you've made, hoping someone, anyone will look at you and say, yes, I get it. You're not wrong. You're not crazy. You're valid. It starts innocently. You try to express your truth. You try to open up. You try to be real. But when your pain doesn't fit into their box, when your silence is mistaken for arrogance, when your values don't match their comfort, they pull away, they dismiss you, or worse, they judge you. And instead of standing in your truth, you shrink, you explain, you overshare, you try harder to be seen. You mold yourself into shapes that are more acceptable, more likable, more digestible. Until one day, you don't even recognize who you've become. This is the slow death of the soul. And Buddhism whispers something that sounds almost too radical to believe at first. You do not need to be understood to be at peace. You do not need everyone to agree with you. You do not need everyone to like you. You do not need to be seen clearly by the world, to be fully known by yourself. Because every time you abandon your truth to gain approval, you trade peace for performance. Every time you silence your voice so others won't feel uncomfortable, you place their comfort above your freedom. Every time you water down your story just to be accepted, you reject the very essence of what makes you whole. But what if, just what if you stopped? What if you gave up the exhausting pursuit of being understood by people who are not even capable of seeing you? What if you decided that your peace is more important than their opinion? What if you remembered that your worth is not determined by how many people get you, but by how deeply you accept yourself? This is where true freedom begins. It's not loud. It doesn't require an announcement. It starts quietly the moment you stop justifying your silence, your solitude, your softness, your fire. The moment you let people misunderstand you and choose not to explain, because you realize something profound. They don't need to get it. You do. They don't need to understand why you walked away. They don't need to understand why you're healing in private. They don't need to understand your boundaries, your spiritual path, your emotional needs, your rebirth, your breaking point, your stillness. That understanding is your responsibility. And your peace does not require their permission. This is the shift. You begin to speak less not because you have nothing to say, but because your energy is sacred. You begin to share less not because you're hiding, but because you've realized most people listen to reply, not to understand. You begin to choose solitude not because you're antisocial, but because peace is loudest when the world is quiet. And from that space, you begin to grow. You stop apologizing for being different. You stop explaining your trauma to people who've never held space for their own. You stop hoping for closure from those who don't even understand what they broke in you. You stop chasing validation in conversations that always leave you emptier than before. Because now you see that your deepest healing comes not from being seen by the world, but from seeing yourself clearly. That's what Buddhism teaches. Clarity is not found in being validated. It's found in presence, in awareness, in learning to sit with yourself and say, I know who I am. And that's enough. You begin to understand that even the Buddha was misunderstood. So were every awakened soul, every revolutionary, every silent warrior who dared to follow their own truth. They were mocked, ignored, rejected, criticized. And yet, they kept walking. Not because they didn't feel the sting, but because their path was louder than their pain. And so must yours be. There will be times when people will twist your silence into guilt. There will be times when your absence will offend them, when your truth will intimidate them, when your distance will be labeled as selfishness, when your healing will be called ego. Let them. Let them think what they want. Let them judge what they don't understand. Because the more you try to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, the more energy you bleed. But when you reclaim that energy and redirect it inward to your breath, to your path, to your stillness, you begin to rise. And in that rising, something incredible happens. You become immune. Not cold, not arrogant, not numb. but sovereign, clear, rooted. Their approval no longer moves you. Their confusion no longer shakes you. Their noise no longer drowns you. Because now you know what they think is their story. What you hold is your truth. And your truth does not require defense, only embodiment. You walk differently, not faster, not louder, but with presence. You speak differently, fewer words, more impact, more alignment. You love differently, freely, fully, but never again from a place of needing to be understood. And from this space, you attract different souls. Souls who see you not because you begged to be seen, but because you finally stopped hiding. This is peace. This is freedom. It is not given. It is claimed the moment you stop negotiating your identity for a seat at the wrong table. So let them misunderstand you. Let them question your silence. Let them mislabel your boundaries. Let them gossip, doubt, guess, project. Because the deeper truth is, you were never here to be understood by everyone. You were here to understand yourself. And once you do, once you truly do, no opinion, no rejection, no misunderstanding can touch the peace that lives inside of you. That's when the noise fades. That's when the tension releases. That's when your heart finally exhales. Because now, finally, you are free. If you've made it this far, if you've listened, absorbed, reflected, and breathed with these lessons, then something inside you has already begun to shift. Maybe quietly, maybe without fireworks. But it's there. A small, unshakable stillness, a deeper breath, a whisper of clarity. The realization that your life was never meant to be a race, but a return. You've been taught to chase, to strive, to become, to fix everything, to fix yourself. But the path of Buddhism isn't about becoming someone else. It's about removing what's not you, the lies, the fear, the noise, the pressure, the wounds you've carried for so long, you forgot they were never yours to begin with. You were never broken. You were buried. Buried under the weight of other people's expectations. Buried under shame. Buried under 1,000 voices telling you to be anything but you. But now, you're unlearning. You're remembering. You're breathing again. You're finally understanding what the Buddha meant when he said, "No one saves us but ourselves. No one can and no one may. We ourselves must walk the path." And you are walking it not perfectly, but consciously. You've let go of what no longer serves you. You've sat with the darkness instead of running. You've learned that peace isn't found, it's built. You've stopped chasing validation. You've chosen silence over reaction. You've remembered that everything you need is already inside you. That is real transformation. Not a change in appearance. Not a new identity. But a homecoming to the soul that has always been waiting for you to return. And as you rise from these teachings, remember this. You don't have to fix everything today. You don't have to force clarity. You don't have to pretend to be strong every moment. You only have to be here, fully, awake, present, because that's where your power lives. In the breath you're taking right now, in the space between thoughts, in the quiet surrender to what is. You are not behind. You are not lost. You are not too late. Everything that has happened, every wound, every loss, every silence, has prepared you for this version of you, the one who listens deeply, the one who no longer begs the world to understand, the one who sees suffering as a teacher, not a punishment, the one who doesn't run from stillness but walks into it like a warrior returning home. This is your life. Not tomorrow, not someday. This moment, this breath, this awareness. Let this be the moment you stop performing and start living. Let this be the moment you stop waiting and start being. Let this be the moment you look in the mirror, breathe into your own soul and say, I am enough. I am here. I am home. Because you are. And now the path is yours. Walk it with softness. Walk it with strength. Walk it with the quiet confidence of someone who no longer needs to prove anything to anyone. You are not here to escape life. You are here to wake up within it. And now, you have. Let peace rise with every breath. Let light follow your every step. Let this be the beginning, not of a new life, but of your true life. Silent, grounded, unshakable, awake. This is your moment. Walk forward in peace. You are free.